over here on the East Coast. Good evening for some of you. And we'll jump in. We're doing a textual study, a svadhyaya, of traditional textual sources. And primarily will be linked, our project is our dharma. The dharma of the workshop is to connect, have a look at the Isvara. We're going to be focusing on Isvara. So we'll be focusing on the Isvara element, the Isvara Sutras in the Yoga Sutras. There are 6 or 7 of them, very scanty, very minimalistic, presence of Ishvara there. We'll be engaging that. It's barely 20 odd words. But of course, Patanjali is not just, writing this in a bubble. He's assuming his readership would be aware of what Ishvara means in the larger context. So to get a sense of that, we'll read the Gita and we'll see that basically everything Patanjali says about Ishvara in the Yoga Sutras overlaps with what Krishna says about himself in the Gita, and you could make the same connections with Shiva in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. So we'll just make these connections. And then I'd like, if we have time, to read a lila with you, a story of sort of real life bhakti. What is real life bhakti? The sutras are kind of very for an elite few. Anyone reading the sutras, first of all, would be in ancient India would be a male brahmana, because and people would not have access to Sanskrit unless they were male brahmanas. So it's a scholastic text, an elite text. You can compare it to, I don't know, Aquinas, studying Thomas Aquinas in the Christian tradition. Most Christians don't study Thomas Aquinas or the early church fathers. They might read the story of the saints or something. So, but that's scholastic Christianity. So there's scholastic yoga, and Yoga Sutras is a scholarly production. And what Patanjali has done is systematized pre-existing traditions, which is what the Sutra traditions set out to do. Vedanta Sutras and all of the sutras, Mimamsa Sutras, Nyaya Sutras, they systematize and they preserve in this sutraic form. And then generations of also scholastics, male Brahmins, then write commentaries on the sutras. So that's the history. But let's start with an invocation. Just to put ourselves in the mindset of students. We're all students, and we sit at the feet of our teachers. In this case, will be the invocations to Patanjali as teacher, as guru, as he will present himself in the sutras, and Lord and Sri Krishna. So just a few invocations. You might know the Patanjali invocation when we get to it. You'll recognize that. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Akanda Mandalakaram Yena Vyaptam Characharam Tat Padam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate. Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hare Priye. This one you might know, Yogena Chitasya Padena Vacham Malam Sharirasya Chavaidyakena Yo Apakarot Tam Pravaram Muninam Patanjalim Pranjalir Anatosmi Abahu Purusha Akaram Shanka Chakra Asi Dharinam Sahasra Shirsha Shvetam Pranamami Patanjalim. And finally, if all else fails, if that lot doesn't work, Apavitra Pavitro Va. sarvavastha gatopiva. Ya smaret pundarikaksham sa bhayabhyantara shuchihi. So it's a nice, it's a pleasure for me to do a workshop on Isvara because as a bhakta, it's always not, bhaktas always like to talk about Isvara. And because I wrote this Yoga Sutras, everybody wants workshops on Yoga Sutras, which is understandable. Of course, Yoga Sutras is a magnificent text, but it's a text that takes us to our Atman. The goal of the Yoga Sutras is Svarupe Vasthanam, announced in the second verse, right? Ata Yoga Anushasanam, Yoga's Chitta Vritti Nirodha, third verse. And what is the goal? Tada, then what happens? Tada, drashtu Svarupe Vasthanam. One attains an experience of one's own drashtuhu, pure consciousness. Consciousness is just seeing, as just not seeing is not, it's a bit of a tricky thing because when we think of seeing something. We think of content consciousness, but the goal of yoga is to take us to a place of, it's not contentless. Sometimes it's called contentless, and that's not wrong, but really it's consciousness of consciousness. So there is, the objective is consciousness itself, if that makes any sense. And it's probably one of those things we shouldn't be trying to define too much because we're trying to filter it through our rational minds. But of course, if you're a sutra writer, that's what you do. That's your dharma. The dharma of a sutra writer is to give coherence to a tradition, even if it's a tradition that takes one beyond intellectuality, but still, it's the dharma of a theologian or of a sutra writer is to give respectability, intellectual respectability to a tradition, number one, and number two, to give it coherence, especially if there's a threat to that tradition, as it was the case in early India, of course, of Buddhism. Buddhism did not accept a Svarupe Vasthanam type of liberation. For Buddhists, consciousness always has to have an object, but an object external to themselves. The idea of content-less consciousness or consciousness conscious of consciousness, it would be incoherent to Buddhists. They wouldn't accept that. That's one of the differences between a Buddhist practice, deep level, not sort of high street mainstream Buddhism, but real deep level Buddhist practice. One of the differences that their understanding and of the self is that it's momentary, interdependent. It always has an object. Anyway, let's not get sidetracked. So our job, what we're going to do in this workshop is we're going to be focusing on the Isvara element. So I mentioned that, even though the goal of Patanjali is not Isvara, Isvara is just a sort of prop. It's kind of like something that will get you somewhere else. So even though the commentators call it bhakti, the first commentator Vyas calls it bhakti, Ishvara Pranidhana, this verse the word that we'll encounter in a minute when we start reading the sutras. So Vyas, the first commentator, because you can't read sutras without a commentary. They're designed to be unpacked. They're just kind of little bullets. A sutra is a bullet. It's like if you're giving a talk or a presentation, then you don't want to read out the whole paper because it's so boring when people just stand at the podium and just read their papers and there's no eye contact and their tone of voice doesn't change. That put everyone to sleep in about 10 seconds. So rather than that, a good speaker is engaging, right? Sort of, and allowing some freedom of the muses to inspire the intelligence. So, but you want to keep a little bit of structure. You don't, sometimes you take detours, you can't remember where you started. So you write down a number of bullets. You write down 20 bullets, bang, 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 bang. And then you take off on one, and you have a little discussion on the one, and then it runs its course, and you come back to number two. So that's what sutras are. They're like bullets, and the bullet is only one or two words. It's just meant to be a memory trigger. You the speaker knows what it means. All right, so you're giving a talk on, I don't know, anything, the garden, and then you write down rose, and then okay, well, you're going to talk about your roses, and then you write down, whatever, mulch, And then you have a discussion. So that's what sutras are. They're kind of like bullets that contain, and the nature of a sutra is, I call them minimalistic, but really what you're trying to do is impact the maximum amount of information in the minimal amount of verbiage. So the average length of a sutra is 6 words. So we talk about this lofty, yoga philosophy. You know how many words there are? How many words there are in all the sutras? 1,200. It's like 2 pages, double spaced, 12 font. All of this yoga philosophy, it comes from the commentaries. So the commentaries then tell us what the sutras mean. So we're going to be focusing on Isvara in the Yoga Sutras, and we're going to piggyback into, we're going to springboard rather from that into the Gita, and then we're going to end up with a nice story of baby Krishna, which is what real life Isvara Pranidhana looks like in one Isvara tradition. There are multiple Isvara traditions, okay, in India. That's our project. And we got 3 hours. So make sure you got a log on the fire. I have to jump up every so often and throw a log in mine. Make sure you got your green tea on the stove. And off we go. Okay. So Isvara, first of all, is a term that is used for, when we want to think about God as power, right? In the Christian traditions, you think about God, you look at the great theologians like Aquinas and Augustine, and by the way, Greek theology is really, Christian theology is really Greek, is really Aristotle and Plato filtered through the Bible. It's very interesting. The actual philosophical part of Christian theology comes from the Greeks, and then they have to make it fit in the Bible because they're Christians. That means they have to, whatever the Bible says, that has to be true. So therefore, they take Greek, specifically Plato and Aristotle, and so whatever great, especially Aristotle for Aquinas, whatever Aristotle said about God, then Aquinas takes that. Because Aristotle's just a pure philosopher, right? He's constructing God just purely what can the intellect say that must be the case about God. And then Aquinas then obviously then sort of filters that through the Bible. So Christian theology, you think of God, you think of omnipotence, one of the omnis of God, right? You have omniscience, omnipotent, omnibenevolent. You have omnipotent power. Is the point? Ish means power. To Isvara is the being with more power, really, or supreme power. So when you're using the term Isvara, it's usually used in connection with the creator God. Now, Patanjali doesn't talk about creation. That doesn't mean he didn't accept Isvara as creator God, but that's not his project. His project is Chittavritti Nirodha. He's not talking about creation and a million other things one could talk about. But God with power. Okay, so that's the term Ishvara, and that's the term used in philosophical discourse in ancient India. It's a term that's used between those who accept Ishvara and those that reject Ishvara. So equivalent to our Western sort of theism and atheism, or theism and non-theism, you have in the equivalent to that in ancient India is those who accepted Ishvara were Ishvaravadins, those who accepted Ishvara, the theists, and those who said that we don't need to posit a God in order to account for reality as we know it. And they were near Ishvaravadins. We don't have to accept Ishvara. That would be the Buddhists, that would be the Jains, and within the Vedic schools, one or two other expressions of the Vedic schools, Mimamsa and some Sankhya. Okay, so first off, starting off, Patanjali is in the theistic cluster of Vedic traditions. By the term Vedic, I mean by Vedic, those traditions that at least nominally accept the Vedic scriptures, the four Vedas, the Brahmanas, Aranyakas, Upanishads. Okay, they're Vaidika. Buddhists are not Vaidika. They don't, even though the Buddha himself didn't reject them, but later Buddhists, sever themselves from the Vedika textual tradition, and then they create their own canonical texts, And eventually that becomes formalized, 4 centuries later. And then we have the Tripitaka, the Buddhists. So in the Vaidika traditions, and there were debates between the Vaidika traditions and the non-Vaidika traditions. And within the Vaidika traditions, there were debates. And one of the debates is there an Ishvara, is there not? That's not a debate that all intellectual cultures throughout human history anyway are going to have those debates. The only way you can stop them is if you kill people, if you execute them for being non-theistic, then they have to shut up. Then the atheists have to shut up, but it's always there. There's always non-theistic, positions. So Patanjali is coming in the Ishvara Vadin. There is an Ishvara. Okay, now what's the function of Ishvara in Patanjali? And we're gonna so let's jump to verse Sutra 123, which is where we first where Ishvara is introduced. Ishvara pranidhanat va. Okay, pranidhana means to surrender. Pranidha. So to place oneself down and forward. So you can think of someone paying an obeisance, what may be called homage. If you've been to India and you've been to the great holy centers and the great temples, you'll see the real devotees when they enter the temple, they prostrate themselves fully, dandavat, like a plank. They full long prostration before the deities. I suppose the nearest thing we have that in Christianity would be genuflecting. That's kind of the same thing. But if you're a proud, 16th century warrior, Christian warrior, come to the church with all your armory, you're not going to do a prostration. And you say the most you're going to do is bend down for a second on one knee. So, but it's the same kind of thing. You're offering, and that's a namaha. It's an obeisance to the mighty Lord. So pranidhana is something like that. It's it's a kind of an act of submission. So therefore, the goal of yoga is not love of God or relationship with God, as it might be in an Abraham, certainly Christian and say Islamic tradition, and other Hindu traditions like Vaishnavas, to my own tradition, Vaishnava traditions. That's not the goal. That's not the goal. That's not the functional role of Ishvara in Patanjali. Later on in chapter 2, we're going to say, well, basically has two functions. He's a functional. Ishvara's presence is functional. He offers two functions. And one is that if you're going to Chittavritti Nirodha, I'll say this and then we'll read the verses. You need to fix the mind on something. Patanjalian yoga is not mindfulness. Don't get them confused. Mindfulness is very popular now in the States, I imagine everywhere else. But that's a meditative tradition coming out of the Buddhist tradition. It is not the Vaidika or Hindu, what nowadays we call Hindu type of meditation. That's specifically Buddhist, and it does not involve fixing the mind. So the Indian traditions are fixing the mind completely and utterly, stilling it, fixing it so it doesn't move. That's what Chittavritti Nirodha, the definition of yoga, and right away, Sutra number 2, bang. Right, starts off, introduces. What are we going to do in this sutra? How's it going to be different from other sutras? Well, Atta Kim Bhavamaha, what are we going to do? Atta Yoga Anushasanam, we're going to continue the teachings of yoga. Right? Not loud and clear, bold print, top of the contract. This is what we're going to do. Great. Okay, yoga. What is it? What is this yoga? Chittavritti Nirodha. Immediately. Nirodha, total stilling. Not mindful, not witnessing the mind, not letting the mind just sort of, that's mindfulness. And that gets popularized and, and it gets secularized and it becomes part of our kind of, high street spirituality. That's a Buddhist, that has its roots in Buddhism. The Hindu practices, not just Patanjalian, but these practices, then this Nirodha practice, filters through all of the Indian meditative traditions, Shaiva, Vaishnava, Shakta, It's a Nirodha practice. Nirud, to stop, to block, complete stopping. So so if you're going to block the mind, so stop it, you have to use something. So, for example, the word Nirodhana, by the way, it gets used in India, and when they, for example, when they put up barricades on the road, when the police want to slow the flow of traffic, like if you're driving from Delhi airport, they want to just have control. So they put these blocks, and they're called Nirodhanas. It's the same word. They want to stop the flow of traffic, but something needs to block it. You can't just, wishfully want it to stop. So that, as a Nirodhana has come to mean a barricade. So if we want to Nirodha the mind, something needs to block it. Or put differently, the mind needs to be fixed on something such that that thing takes its entire, it absorbs the entirety of consciousness's content. That consciousness is only fixed on one thing. That's what Chittavritti Nirodha is. That's what Patanjalian meditation is. And what is that one thing? It's usually a mantra. It's usually a mantra. Although Patanjali says, all right, fix it on anything you want. Eventually just, he says, fix it on anything you want. Yata abhimatava. Can you imagine? There's probably students sitting there going, well, Guruji, how can I fix it on this? And then somebody, oh, can I fix it on this? Yata abhimata. Fix it on anything you want. But he's clearly prioritizing Ishvara Pranidhana, as we will see. So that's the first function of Ishvara in the Yoga Sutras. The prop or support of the mind. To still the mind needs to be still on something denser than itself. What do I mean by that? Look, here's a piece of paper. I want it to be still. Look, let's say, imagine it's flying through space. At some time, I want it to be still. So I have to have a prop, something that's air is actually material, but it's too subtle to stop it. It's got to be something denser. Okay, now it can be still. So that's the prop, the support of fixing this piece of paper. Well, mind is a material thing. Remember that, it's not a property of the soul. As Christians say, because they get it from Plato. Remember, Christian theology is Platonic. So Plato, mind stuff is a quality of the soul. That's why he calls the soul psyche. So, not so in yoga. The soul, and we shouldn't use that word. We should, Sanskrit has its own terms. We shouldn't colonialize Sanskrit and use Western terms unless they fit perfectly. If they don't, why should we force Indian concepts into Western terms? That's colonialization. What else is colonization? You try to force a culture into your culture. We Brits have not a very pretty record of that. So why should we do that with philosophical concepts? The soul doesn't work for Atman or Purusha, because the soul in Western philosophy and Christian theology, and I keep saying, Trace, there's Plato he's the one who, basically, he's he's at the base of that idea. The soul is the thinking part. It's consciousness, to be sure. So that bit's shared with yoga, but it's also thinking and will and feeling and emotions. Not in yoga. In some other Hindu schools, so can't say Hinduism. You have to, Hinduism has what we now call Hinduism has many, many different expressions, many different, Shaiva, Shakta. There's many different schools. So we're doing yoga philosophy. Right? Make sure you don't, slip into calling it Vedic philosophy or Hindu philosophy, because it's yoga philosophy. If you want to slip, you can call it Sankhya philosophy. That's not a slippage. Yoga is Sankhya. It's an expression of Sankhya. So in Sankhya and yoga, the Atman, right? We're not going to use the term soul. Patanjali calls it a Siya, but he does use the term Atman 3 times. But he used the term Siya 6 times. So he seems to be partial to that. Why? Because he wants to stress the aspect. Atman doesn't tell you anything. just a word, you might as well call it amagama. But at least calling something the seer, you're pointing to the fact that it is not seeing in an eyeball sense, but that it does something. The Atman does something, and what does it do? Or maybe that's wrong to say it does something, but it has a quality that functions. And what is that? Consciousness itself. It is the substratum of consciousness. Consciousness is its qualities, but not thought, not mind, not intelligence. Those functions are in a psychic layer external to the Atman. Okay, Atman is the term. I have no idea what your backgrounds are in Indian philosophy. So it doesn't matter. We can go over these terms a million times because we can always excavate them deeper and deeper. But I'll say it one last time, then I'm not going to use the term anymore. Soul, that which is called the soul in Western tradition, that what comes to be known as the soul in English, because it's not known that in Latin, it's animus. But that aspect of the self, which is the point is non-material, that survives death. So that's the parallel to that, the equivalent to that in yoga is called the Purusha or the Atman. Same thing. And Patanjali calls it the seer. Okay, so we're going to use the terms Atman, and if you're not familiar with that, jot it down. Purusha, same thing, and seer. So now we're not going to use the term soul anymore. And the reason why is because the soul, as I just said, is the thinking as well as consciousness, whereas the Atman Purusha, there's no thinking in the Atman or Purusha. For yoga, thinking takes place in a psychic layer, which is inanimate. It's just like the body. It gets animated by consciousness, like our body gets animated. We can understand it. It's easier to understand it that our body gets animated by consciousness. It's a bit more tricky to understand how thinking itself is also inert, just it's subtle. It's like software. So, and also because our thoughts seem much closer to our real self. It's a bit easier to understand, well, I'm not this body, especially when you get old. I thank God for that. I think, no, I'm not this old body, right? That's a bit easier. And plus, every tradition known to anthropology has accepted something like that. Every culture in the world known to anthropology almost has accepted there's something different from the body that survives death. So that's not like a earth-shattering idea, whether we accept it or not. If we don't, we're materialists. But still, if we're materialists, we define ourselves against an idea that we understand very well in our Western culture. Okay, but what's much harder for us to understand is not only we're not the body, but we're also not the mind. These thoughts are just like software. Software is still just bits of electric, whatever it is, bits of electricity on little boards. Keep, whatever software, however they make software, right? They just power and then just connections but it's matter. So the goal of yoga then is Svarupa Vastanam. I'm stressing this because when we get to bhakti, if we have time to read our story, we'll see the goal of bhakti is not Svarupa Vastanam. Bhaktas I'm not even interested in Svarupa Vastanam. They're not interested in, not that they reject it, but it's not the end of the journey for them. For bhaktas, experiencing your own Atman, fine, that's great, nice, fine and dandy, but it's not the end of the spiritual journey. For bhaktas, the end of the spiritual journey is a relationship with the supreme Atman, a Paramatman. Bhagavan. Okay, so, but Bhagavan can give an experience of the Atman, can bestow it. In the Gita, Krishna says the same thing. For those who don't want eternal bhakti, who don't want a relationship with Bhagavan other than this functionalist one, what is a functionalist one? It's like a kid to a parent, give me. Can you give me this? Can you give me that? So so that's the function. So Ishvara has a functional value in the Yoga Sutra. For a bhakta point, from a bhakta's point of view, there's no bhakti here. Or if at best it's jnana mishrita, it's mixed with a desire. It's not real bhakti. Well, let's put it different way. The goal of the Yoga Sutras is not bhakti. Bhakti is just a means to attain another goal. And what's the other goal? An experience of your own pure consciousness. Nothing wrong with that. That's an extremely high, noble, lofty goal. But let's just be clear what the goal is. It's announced in Sutra number 3. Tada, then. Then means what? Then once chitta vritti nirodhitaha, once there's been chitta vritti nirodhana, so the chitta is in a niruddhita state. Tada kim bhavati, then what happens? Tada drashtu swarupa vastana. So it's absorbed, it's its nature. Sva means your own. Bhakti doesn't want its own nature. It wants to be absorbed in the nature of God as a distinct being. So with all that said, Patanjali says in 123, well, you can attain this goal of yoga, Ishvara Pranidhanatva. You can attain it by surrender to Ishvara. So then, having said that, he needs to tell us, well, who is this Ishvara? Of course, anybody reading this would know, but nonetheless, Patanjali connects this with everything he says here about Ishvara is what the Shaivites say about Shiva, the Vaishnavas say about Vishnu, Narayana, and the Krishnaites say about Krishna. And the Devi traditions say about the goddess. Well, for example, what? Well, 24. Go to the end, because Sanskrit, sometimes you read from the end, because it doesn't matter. Sanskrit, it's less important where you put words, because you know whether a word is a subject or an object by the case ending. We're in the middle of a course on Sanskrit. If anybody's interested in learning Sanskrit, you can go on my website and you download it for free. It's we're putting up 2 a week, so it'll be ongoing for the end of it because of COVID. Because of COVID, we're all recording our lessons. So I thought, well, why not, recording them for my students? Why not put them up on the website for the yoga community? So we've got several courses up there. Vedanta Sutra. There's a Hindu philosophy course that's coming to an end, another 3 weeks. And you can just, if you're interested in philosophy or even Sanskrit, then you can log on and just edwinbryant.org, and you can and you'll see the links for videos. So in Sanskrit, it doesn't matter where you put the words so much, because have you studied Latin? You ask someone that in America, and nobody'd say like, what, Latin? What are you, an alien? But when I was a kid, we studied Latin in school. Maybe that dates me a bit. But if you studied Latin, right? Rex, regem, regis, regi, rege, like the king, right? So you have nominative, accusative. In America, they don't even know what nominative, accusative, genitive, locative is. What to speak about, knowing a noun declension. Well, the point is, whether a word is genitive, locative, ablative from the ending. So you can actually put words anywhere, not anywhere randomly, but you have much more flexibility in a declining language to put words where you want them. And why might you want to change them around? Let's say you have a meter problem. You're only allowed 8 syllables. Dharma kshetre, kuru kshetre, 8 syllables. Mamekam pandavas cheva, and you've got a word that's a syllable too long. Well, you put it in the next line then. So that's not bad if you're a poet. You sign off on that one. That's a good thing to have in your as a possibility. So we're going to start reading backwards, right? And I'm just explaining why. It's not like Arabic, which always reads backward. It's not like that. Sometimes you read forward, sometimes backwards, and so on. Right now, who is this Ishvara for Patanjali? Verse 24, Ishvara, he's a Purusha Vishesha. He's also Purusha. What does that mean, Purusha? Not Prakriti. What is Purusha? Well, one thing we can say is not Prakriti. And why would we say it like that? Well, the Sankhya Karikas puts it like that, the Sankhya Sutras. It defines Prakriti, and it says, well, Prakriti is the object. It is inanimate. It is ever-changing. And it gives a list of what matter is. Very general things. No physicist would disagree, right? It's inanimate, it's ever-moving, it is the observed. Well, a physicist could be a fancy physicist using Hubble bubble, but if he trimmed it down, he would say, yeah, that sounds about right. So the Sankhya Karika gives a list of property, and then it says, and the Purusha is the opposite. That's all it says. You can't start projecting mental concepts on what Purusha is. And all you can really say is, well, it's chit, it's conscious. We can understand that because we are conscious. So we can understand consciousness just by dint of the fact that we are consciousness. But because of ignorance, this is not our topic for this workshop, but because of ignorance, our consciousness is absorbed in body mind, becomes absorbed in body mind, and then the mind kicks in and imagines and then creates this story that I am this body, I'm male, I'm female, I'm black, I'm white, and I am these feelings, and I am happy, I am sad. That's all coming. Consciousness is just like a battery animating everything. It's the mind that tells these stories, and the mind that is in ignorance, avidya, is a state of mind. Ignorance of what? It's ignorance that it is not actually the ultimate self, but the ultimate self is that which animates it, something lying behind and pervading it. That's so subtle. So the mind in ignorance then thinks, the kleshas of Patanjali are all states of mind, not states of Atman. So therefore, what is the Atman? It's, one way, it's just neti, neti, neti. The Upanishads, the oldest sacred yogic texts, they just say, na iti, like the Sankhya Sutra. Na iti, not this, na iti, it is this, na iti, not this table, not this chair, not the world out there. Okay, cross all that off. Right, and that's why Sankhya gets into metaphysics. Let's understand very clearly what it is not. What is the nature of that which it is not? Oh, okay, well, it's made up of whatever it's made up of, right? The Mahabhutas, the Tanmatras, and Sankhya has its metaphysics. But so Plato would say, oh yeah, we agree. Okay, yeah. What is the thinking? And Sankhya would say, Mr. Plato, you got to keep not itting. You haven't finished your not itty. You got a couple more things to not itty. No, you're not that mind. You're not the mind. You're not the thinking. Descartes, imagine poor old Descartes. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. But Patanjali would say, oh, well, you're not that, mate. Now you're gonna go back to the drawing boards. You're not even that. So this is pure consciousness. Okay, so what about Ishvara then? Ishvara is also a Purusha Vishesha. He's also a special kind. What does it mean, special? Well, he's going to say why he's special. But remember, yoga is dualistic. Don't project Advaita Vedanta. Everybody's projecting Advaita Vedanta all of a sudden. Advaita Vedanta is kind of somehow or other monistic Hinduism, Neo-Advaita, gets transported at the end of the 19th century by Vivekananda, and some or other has pervaded the high streets and the mainstreams of, East-West bookstores in the West, and everybody thinks that Hinduism is monistic. The soul merges into something Brahman and loses its individuality. No, it does in Advaita Vedanta, yes, but that's one little sub-school. Just happens to become a big sub-school in our day and age. Yoga is dualistic. One soul is different from another soul, eternally. I'm using the term soul, and I said I wouldn't. One Atman is distinct from another Atman. And there is a super distinct Atman called Param Atman. Patanjali calls him a Purusha Vishesha. Same thing. Parama Atma, Supreme Atman, Purusha Vishesha, a special kind of Purusha, distinct from all others. Well, how's he distinct then? Well, remember, Patanjali's only got like 10, 15 words. Don't expect a sophisticated theology of Ishvara. Here, even the Gita doesn't, is not that specific about the nature of Bhagavan. The Bhagavatam is, however. So he's a Vishesha, right? Why is he a Vishesha? Well, aparam rishtaha, working backwards, never been affected, tainted, touched. Klesha, karma, vipaka, ashaya, by three things. Kleshas. The kleshas, those of you that know yoga, ignorance, ego, desire, aversion, obviously clinging to life, the fear of death. Never been affected by them. So he's not like some kind of someone that became enlightened and now he's an Ishvara. No, that Jains say that. The Jains say that. They call their enlightened yogis Ishvaras, because they're atheists. They don't accept an eternal, transcendent, supreme Isvara, but they use this term, and they use it to refer to their paradigmatic, their accomplished yogis. They called Ishwaras. Not in the Ishvara traditions of Vedic. Ishvara is eternally distinct. You can never be Ishvara. Ishvara is the creator. Can you create? The definition in the Vedanta is the one who creates the universe. Other yogis may have incredible powers. Whole of chapter 3 is all about powers, and some very grandiose claims of omniscience. Actually, Patanjali says a qualified yogi can bypass the mind, the mind-body mechanism, and then there's nothing limiting consciousness. Consciousness, even the mind, can, when it breaks its kind of karmic limitations, can pervade the whole universe. But Ishvara is not like that. Ishvara's omniscience is a higher level again, as Patanjali will say. But for this verse, he's never been affected by klesha or karma. He's not subject to the law of karma. If you're going to say Krishna is subject to the law, if you're going to say Ishvara is subject to the law of karma, then that means karma is the ultimate power then. And it subjects everybody to its control. If Ishvara is also controlled by karma, then that means karma is the supreme truth then, or the ultimate power. No one's going to, well, actually, there was a school that said that. Mimamsas. The Mimamsas, they were non-theists, and they just said karma is an eternal principle. But Ishvara is not affected by karma, or the kleshas, or vipaka shayer, the fructification of karma. So in that sense, if he's never ever been affected. So we can use the term transcendent for that. Okay, so that's a fair bit of information packed in, even though it's minimalistic. That's all we've got to work with, but we can work it a bit. And I gave a paper at a conference once, and because scholars people right now, it's not cool to be a theist. It's not culturally cool to be a theist. Everybody wants to be a monist. The pendulum swings. The Western civilization was under the thrall of Christianity for 1500, best part of 2 millennia. And then with the Enlightenment, then that became weakened and displaced, not thrown out, but displaced by reason. And now, and so we have all these, negative, Christianity and guilt, not cool, right? Especially the 60s, it's counterculture, all of that. It's not kind of hip to be theistic now, and that pervades academia. Academia is primarily science and philosophy of religion. It's kind of dominantly materialistic. Materialism is just our cultural moment, and the pendulum won't stop there. The more they realize the just amazing fine-tuned nature of the universe, really what happens is everybody's scared to be a theist when the dominant culture, academic culture, is materialist. So what has to happen is a few voices, powerful, well-respected, amazing scholarly voices that no one can mess with. Once a few of those start, and that's happening, saying, look, hang on a minute, this is just ridiculous. We need to relook at this. And then all of a sudden it's not, then more and more voices come out. And then that's how pendulums swing. A lot of it is power, actually. Look at the Republican Party in the States. Everybody's afraid to speak. So that happens in academia. So right now we're in this cultural moment where it's kind of not cool to be a theist. But be aware, most Hindu traditions, other than one you probably never heard of, Mimamsa, and some schools of Sankhya, the rest are all Vedantas, all theistic. Yoga's theistic. So Vaishnava, all of that. So Shaiva, etc. So Ishvara is a where are we? Special soul. Why special? Never been affected by klesha and karma. So we can say transcendent. Okay. If you've got a better word, that's fine with me. I have no investment in the term transcendent. What else? 25. Tatra nirati shayam sarvajna bijam. That he's supremely omniscient. Now, I took a moment to say that that yogis can also kind of be omniscient, according to chapter 3 and 4 of the sutras, because it's only our body-mind mechanisms that's limiting the range of our mind stuff. It's like light. Light can pervade the whole universe unless it's blocked. But we talk about light traveling 14 billion years or whatever we say. Why is that? Because by nature, unless it's stopped by atmosphere or whatever, the wall of my house. So my light bulb here is not going to reach Mars because the wall stops it. But if there was no wall and no atmosphere, it would. So consciousness is like that. It's karmically restricted. That's why you can, one Atman can be born as an ant and have a limited consciousness, and then the ant dies and becomes an elephant. Now its consciousness expands. Well, that means consciousness can expand and contract, depending on what's the barriers that's placed around it. And what are those barriers? Karma. Jatya bhoga, the birth that you take, it's karma. Telada paritapa, right? Potentially later on, your body, your jati, your body that you take is based on your punya hetutvat. They are phala, they're causes, they're effects. Anyway, so Ishvara doesn't have any of that. He's beyond karma. So nothing's controlling the range of his, and I say his because it's Ishvara. But there are goddess traditions, and I just want to throw this out for the ladies, because everyone's getting fed up with all this his. All right, the old feminist scholarship now, they come and smack you on the head with a broom handle if you don't say his or her. But Ishvara is masculine, and if there are goddess traditions, and had we been reading a goddess text like the Devi Gita, we will be saying Ishvari, then we would say her. Okay, so just wanted to say that all the Ishvara traditions have it. Every Ishvara has an Ishvari. So Lakshmi Narayana, Radha Krishna, Sita Ram, Shiv Parvati. So they, except for Kali, she's so out of control. She's so ferocious that even Shiva, who's sort of supposed to be her consort, she's so frenzied, she doesn't even recognize Shiva. She's about to trample on him. So Shiva leaves her alone. So she's just girl power by herself. So she's an Ishwari without an Ishvara. Okay, but mostly all Ishvaras have Ishwaris. So there we are. So Ishvara is a Purusha Vishesha. Okay, and now Tatras Niratishayam Sarvajñā Picham. His omniscience is unsurpassed. Nothing can block it. He's beyond matter. Ishvara can pervade matter, so know everything that's going on within matter, but it's beyond it. It's beyond, because never affected by klesha and karma. Matter is nothing other than, matter is moved by karma. That's the mover, Aristotle's mover. So tatra niratishayam sarvajñā picham, Ishvara is supremely omniscient. And okay, well, I'm sorry if I bring in Aristotle. I just was reading him last night, and I was fascinated. Because the Indian traditions, the Vedanta says certain things have to be revealed. There has to be revelation of certain things beyond the intellect. We don't need revelation for things you can perceive. Patanjali talks about 3 types of knowledge. You get it in pratyaksha, anumana, shabda, and he calls it pratyaksha, anumana, what does he call it? He calls it, God, I'm having a senior moment here. Agama. 3 ways you know something. You ever see it? You know it, right? You look at your table, well, you know there's a table. How do you know there's a table there? Pratyaksha, you see it. But some things you don't see, you infer. And a lot of things we infer, by the way. Really, how many things do we actually know because we've seen them? I mean, your house and your high street, but how many things do we really know because we've seen them? Not that many. So most things we infer their existence, and then other things we hear about. So our scientists tell us there was a Big Bang. Anybody seen a Big Bang recently? No. We receive knowledge of Big Bang through words, and the scientists make that it determined as a Big Bang by inference. Because the universe is expanding. So if it's expanding and you go backwards, well, there must have been a moment when there must have been point zero, and that's how you make an inference to Big Bang. So we know things because we perceive them, and then from our perception, from in this case the perception that the universe is expanding, you make an inference. Well, it must have had an initial point, but we didn't make that. Where do we get the knowledge of Big Bang? Words. So Vedanta would say, we don't, there has to, when it comes to the nature of God, Brahman, they would say Brahman, we cannot perceive it, and nor can we make an inference as to its nature. We can infer that there must be intelligence behind the universe. That's as far as we can go. We don't know if could be a demon up, could be a demoniac intelligence, could be two intelligences, could be a million intelligences. All we can say through reason is there must be intelligence. So therefore, so Patanjali is then coming in the Ishvara traditions, and so let's go to verse number 26, and in verse number 26, he states. And by the way, where is he getting all this from? Remember, Atta Yoga Anushasanam. He's continuing the teachings, the very first sutra. Atta Yoga Anushasanam. Patanjali is not claiming to be making stuff up or like the Buddha did. The Buddha said, I went into a meditative state and the 4 watches of the night, and then he comes out and then he goes to the so-called deer park and he gives his first sermon and Buddhism is born. And he shares his enlightenment experience. No. Patanjali's not doing that. He's saying Anushasanam, I'm keeping the old teachings. So everything he's giving here are the old teachings. So whatever he's presenting about Ishvara is Ishvara from the landscape of his time. And by the way, he's assuming everybody knows what Ishvara is. He's assuming everyone's read the Upanishads. He's assuming everyone's read the Gita. He's assuming that's what Svadhyaya is. Nobody would be reading the Yoga Sūtras unless they'd read the Upanishads and the Moksha Dharma of the Mahabharata and the Gita and texts like that. So he's assuming that we know what Ishvara is. So, with all that said, verse 20, Purvesham api guruhu kalena anavachedat. He is the guru of the ancients. Keep this in mind, because when we go to the Gita, Krishna says, I come down age after age. Dharma samstapanartayam sambhavami yuge yuge. I come down to teach. Teach what? Dharma. Because the Gita is interested in Dharma. But here, Ishvara is the guru. So he's not that's where I was going. So Aristotle's God is not revealed. The Indian traditions say, I started that and then I had a senior moment, forgot which I haven't. I'm at 63. I think it's the beginning of an infinity of senior moments. Let me finish that point, please. So the Vedanta says it has to be revealed. You might be able to infer that there's intelligence, but you don't know the nature of that intelligence, right? Then we have sci-fi stories saying, well, what if we're all in a glass universe and there's some aliens like just looking at us like we look at frogs in the pond? So therefore it has to be revealed. But Aristotle didn't accept that. So he established that there must be God because he said there must be a first mover. And he was purely using reason. But his God, and this is what the connection here, is completely not connected with the world at all. He's completely self-contained. And then how does he act as first mover? Well, like a magnet. A magnet makes things, doesn't change, because you don't want God to change. If God's eternal, he can't change. So Aristotle doesn't want God to change. Something that changes is not eternal. If milk becomes yogurt, it's not milk anymore then. So if something changes, not eternal. So if it's a changeless God, and he gives arguments why it must be so, how does he move then? He says, well, it's like a magnet. A magnet moves things. It doesn't do anything. It's just its nature. So here we have the God of rational Greek philosophy. But the corollary of that is no emotional relationship with the world, Aristotle's God. And of course, Aquinas, when he takes Aristotle God, he has to fit, then the Christians add, kindness and mercy and, Jesus Christ, but they have to add that onto Aristotle. They get the basic infrastructure, and then they sort of Christianize it. But here we have a God who is connected with the world. Okay, so if you're sick of hearing me talk about Aristotle again, I apologize. I was reading him last night. I haven't finished reading him. I have to go back tonight and finish up, and it's on my mind, and it's fascinating how the commonalities, part of our workshop actually, is going to be looking at commonalities in the notion of God between the Sutras and Gita. So verse number 26, he's the guru. A guru is someone who there's an emotional relationship. If you're teaching someone, unless you're purely a real teacher, not someone who's just teaching because it's a job. Well, I couldn't figure out what to do. All right, they needed teachers. So, okay, got to pay my bills. So I got a job as a teacher. Not like that. A real teacher is somebody that wants to help the world. Essentially wants to really stop suffering. All of these traditions that are taught to us, the ultimate goal of the Indian traditions, and one could argue at any real teacher, is trying to, in his or her little way, minimize at least some aspect of the problem of suffering. Patanjali is going to claim that this is the complete and utter solution to suffering. So that's a much larger statement. But so a guru is someone that cares and therefore wants to share knowledge that the guru believes is beneficial, it's benevolent, it's trying to help. So, okay, Krishna says, I come to establish Dharma. Whenever a Dharma is getting out of control, I come to reestablish Dharma so people can live sanely in a civic manner. So here, he is the guru Purvesham, the ancients. Now, how can you be the guru of the ancients? Well, you can be the guru of the ancients if you're not affected by time. We're affected by time. You could say, oh, I wish I was around when Krishna was, I could have, hung out with Krishna. I wish I was around when the Buddha, but I'm not. Why not? Because I'm stuck here. Why am I stuck here? Because I'm bound by time, not just this body and mind. I'm bound by the configuration of Prakriti. We call it the 21st century. It's just a combination of Prakriti. And I can't just jump out. I have to burn up my karma. And then I'm trapped in the next body. But if someone is not trapped by karma, that being who's not trapped by karma can intervene in the movement of Prakriti that we call time, can intervene and give teachings. That's the Indian notion of Isvara. Certainly very strong in the Vaishnava traditions, avatara, incarnation. So Patanjali is obviously drawing on that. He was the guru of the ancients. How is he the guru? Kala anavacheda. He's not cut by time. He's not trapped by time. He's not affected by time. Right? I mean, for us to, we have sci-fi fiction, about going back in time. But Ishwar doesn't need to create some weird capsule or just make up sci-fi stories, because Ishwar is not trapped in time in the first place. So that raises lots of questions. Well, where is Ishvara then? And Patanjali doesn't take us there. Who takes us there? Vedanta. That's a different text. That's not what Patanjali wrote in his contract. What did he write in his contract? Atta yoga anushasanam. And what's yoga? Chitta vritti nirodha. He's not talking about anything else. He tells us yoga. So therefore, all these questions about Ishvara and who is Ishvara and where is Ishvara? If Ishvara is not trapped in matter, well, where is he then? None of that. That all gets worked out by Vedanta. So Purvesham api guruhu kalena anavachedat. Once you learn Sanskrit, my friends, beautiful thing to do. What are you going to do with our minds? Other than get old and senile. And what do we stand? Like 5% chance of getting dementia? What are the stats? 3%, 2%? Learn Sanskrit. Keep your mind active. Yeah. It's a beautiful language. It is an enormous amount of memorization. But we can do it. If I can do it, anyone can do it. It's just willpower. So think about it. You'll feel very, very fulfilled in a deep place. It's not going to give you enlightenment, but it gives you access to reading texts about enlightenment. That's not bad. Svadhyaya. You can't do Svadhyaya in ancient India unless you knew Sanskrit. It was a prerequisite. So, tatra vachakaha prana. Now, what's all this got to do with Chitta Vritti Nirodha? Okay, so there's Ishvara, fine. He's the guru of the ancients, fine. He's not affected by time, okay. He's not subject to klesha karma. Okay, so we know who he is. Why does Patanjali tell us that? In my opinion, he's telling us that because he's connecting Ishvara with all everybody knows about Ishvara from the Bhagavad Gita and the larger cultural context. So but having done that, what's this got to do with Chitta Vritti Nirodha? Well, 27-28. Tasya vachikaha pranavaha. He manifests as the sound Om. This is the Om from the Upanishads. And the Upanishads, Brahman is Om. Brahman, that absolute truth is. Not that Om is a sonic representation. Normal words represent something other than themselves. What do I mean by that? Here's a bottle. The word bottle is not this. It represents it. It's just a sort of bottle, two phonemes. And by social convention, we all agree, or once upon a time, Anglo-Saxons jumped off the boats, ran around England, so, okay, what should we call this? Should I have a little meeting, or let's call it a bottle? Fine. And that's how bottle comes to be. I'm making that up. But Om isn't like that. It's not a sound that was, okay, what should we call Brahman? We have to have a word for it, otherwise we can't refer to it. And someone says, oh, let's call it, Amagama. And then someone else says, nah, that's too long. Let's call it Om. Not like that. Brahman is its sonic presence manifest in that phoneme. So just as be clear about that. And that's what mantras are, by the way. They're not representations or words that we call something else, something outside of them. That presence is within them. That presence can manifest in sound. Why not? Ishvara can manifest in any form. So therefore, tasya vachikaha pranavaha. His pranava is another term for Om. Pranu. It manifests, it emanates forth. Pra, forth. Nu to be sound, to sound. Like Nadi. Well, maybe not like Nadi. Pranu. Right, so still that doesn't tell us what has this got to do with yoga. Well, here's what it's got to do with Chitta Vritti Nirodha, verse 29. Tajapas tadartha bhavanam. You do japa on that sound Om. That's how you still the mind. You still the mind because you have to fix it on something. Let's go right back to where we started. If you're going to do a Chitta Vritti Nirodha practice, the mind has to be fixed on a thing, one thing. Because if it's more than one thing, the mind's going to vritti backwards and forwards, and you don't want that. You want no vritti. It has to be one thing. And japa comes highly recommended, not just in Patanjali, the entire Indian meditational tradition. Not Indian, but Hindu, and early Buddhists, by the way. Not all Buddhist meditation is mindfulness. That's one of the two streams of Buddhist, I don't know, maybe there's more, but there's at least two streams of Buddhist meditation. One of them is the Chitta Vritti Nirodha practice, often on a mantra. I'm just going to throw a log in the fire, my friends. If you need to have a quick pee break, I'll be back in 2 minutes. So, so then japa. So then by doing japa is the very quiet repetition of a mantra, and it's very quiet, and the mind is fixed on it. And so that the goal of japa is to fix the mind on the mantra. When it wanders off, you bring it back. Wanders off, bring it back. Krishna says in the Gita, Yatasyato nishcharati manas chanchalam astiram tatastato niyam yetat. Wherever the mind wanders, just bring it back. Wanders, bring it back. That's actually japa. And this is the most common form of meditation in ancient India, fixing the mind on the mantra. And then, of course, in the more developed bhakti traditions, the Om manifests a fuller presence of a fuller manifestation of Isvara. So for the Shaivites, it's Shiva. Isvara Shiva. So they want, Om is a little impersonal. It's like a seed. You don't really know what's in a seed. Seed is full of potency. It has everything is packed into it, but you don't really know what's in a seed. Someone just gives you a seed. You don't know, is it an apple tree? What kind of a seed is it? So those that have a richer, deeper bhakti practice, what does that mean? They're devoted to a form of Isvara. Their hearts have been won. They've fallen in love with a form of Isvara. So they don't just want Om. They want their mantra to bring that fuller presence to their minds. So the Shaivites will go Om Namo Shivaya. And Shiva comes out of the Om for them. And for the Vaishnavas, it's Om Namo Narayanaya. Narayana. From the Krishna Bhaktas, it's Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this is the japa. Repeating that, not singing it, that's kirtan. But repeating that japa and fixing the mind on it, that's japa. Repeating the mantra and fixing the mind on it, that's japa. Okay, so this then is the role of Isvara in Patanjali. And later on, and he surfaces in the Kriya Yoga. So if you go over to 2.1, we'll see that how does practice begin? How do we begin? Let's say we want to meditate. Let's say we desire to have an experience of pure consciousness, which is what Patanjali's proposing at the beginning, right? Ata yoga anushasanam, yoga chitta vritti nirodha, tada drashtu sarupe vastanam. Suppose we're attracted to this idea of drashtu sarupe vastanam, having an experience of pure consciousness, and we say, yeah, I'm suffering, which is where the spiritual journey begins, by the way. So if you're suffering, embrace that. It's the source of wisdom if you interpret it correctly. Patanjali says that. Too, we don't have time, and that's not on our agenda for today. A wise person sees it's all frustrating. Sarvam dukkha. If you're suffering, use that as a trigger to take that experience in a spiritual direction, because all embodied existence is suffering. This is everyone accepts, the Buddha, Patanjali, Jain, everybody. So therefore, let's say you say, yes, I'm tired of suffering. I try to fix it in so many ways. I thought maybe if I made more money, I would be happy. No. Change my partner, I'd be happy. No. Moved over to California. No. Try this. No. So when we realize, hang on a minute, it's just something existentially wrong with this whole attempt to solve suffering materially. If you get to that place, Patanjali calls you a wise person. That's the first sign of wisdom. To understand I cannot solve my frustration through material tinkering. If that's the case, then chapter 2, then Kriya Yoga, what do you do? What kind of kriyas do you do? How do you start the spiritual journey? Well, number 1, tapaha, start to control these desires. And number 2, svadhyaya, study, learn, deepen your understanding of what you're doing. What is the yogic journey? What is consciousness? Why am I embodied? What is karma? What is God? What are the options for Ishvara? Does Ishvara, right? Is he just Aristotle's abstract prime mover, or is there more? How does God reveal himself? Well, we know how he reveals himself in the Bible. Well, how does he reveal himself in the Indian traditions then? Unless we want to say he only reveals himself once in the Near East, Indians will laugh at you. Say, well, what kind of what kind of a skimpy little God is that then? Only revealed himself once. So what does Ishvara look like in India? Oh, Shiva. First, it might be, wait a minute, hang on, is that mythology? What is that? Is that a fairy story? So you project your samskaras on it. But if you take a breath and say, hang on a minute, let me not do that. Let me see what these traditions have to say. Then that's svadhyaya. You study. And all of a sudden you realize, my goodness, this is deep stuff. So the second thing is svadhyaya in Kriya Yoga. And then the third thing there is, again, Ishvara Pranidhana, same two words. Surrender to Ishvara. It's devotion. You will never figure it out ourselves, my friends. You think the human mind is going to figure it out? Of course it won't. You might even get as far as, I don't know, black matter, expanding multiple universes. It's you'll never understand through material means. People don't even know, scientists don't even know what life is, what consciousness is. We've gone inside an atom. Newton thought that was it. And then we went inside that, neutrons, inside that, quarks and muons. Now we're going down to strings, and we haven't found what life is. That's not going to do it. So consider then that there is an Ishvara, and that Ishvara does, the guru, as Patanjali says, and he does teach these things. And this information it doesn't mean you blindly, fanatically just believe anything, but open the mind to this possibility. And svadhyaya is the second thing to do. That's the second most important thing in the spiritual journey. In Kriya, at least it's the second thing Patanjali says. It all begins with svadhyaya. How do you begin a spiritual path? You hear something about it. You meet a teacher, you read a book. The book is a teacher. How do you begin a spiritual journey? What are you just going to wander off in the mountains? I mean, you could. I'm sure there's plenty of Celts that did that, and Druids, but I bet they had their revelations too. But there's revelation. So that's svadhyaya. Svadhyaya puts us, at least it's worth a try, that if there is an Ishvara, like Patanjali says, and he is the guru, and he does teach the ancients, well, let's see what some of these Ishvara traditions say then. That's svadhyaya. Okay. And then we find the same Ishvara. Remember, our focus is just on Ishvara. Then we find the same Ishvara in the 8 limbs of yoga. And then we find one other verse, and I want to go into the Gita, and that's 40 something. Let's have a look. It's where Patanjali says Ishvara can give you samadhi. You want Ishvara, you want samadhi, Ishvara can give it to you. You Ishvara Pranidhana, Ishvara can give it to you. But it has to be 100% Ishvara Pranidhana. Bhaktas don't want that. They don't want it because they want bhakti. They don't want just Svarupe Vastanam. But you want Svarupe Vastanam, Sutra number 3, experience of pure consciousness. Well, verse number 245, Ishvara Pranidhana. Samadhi siddhi, he'll give you success of samadhi. So that's Ishvara, minimalistic. How many words? 20 odd words. That's what the Patanjali has to say about Ishvara. We now move on to the Gita, but I'll take questions. I'm sorry if I'm yelling. I find it's, one thing about teaching online, I find it seems to me I yell. I don't know why. You can't yell in a classroom, but somehow it's probably just my innate nature comes out. My real nature comes out.
Edwin?
Yes.
Hi, this is Monica. I have a question. In one of your talks you gave over the summer about the Upanishads, you mentioned how some bhaktis don't want to be liberated the way a yoga aspirant wants to, and that if they were liberated, they would be liberated from God or Bhagavan.
Exactly.
And they don't want that.
Yes.
I guess my question is, are the yoga aspirants aware of that? Or they just don't care? Like they want to be completely chittavritti nirodha. They're atheistic.
Well, it's a really good question, Monica. And I'm actually doing a commentary on the Bhagavad Gita now. And it's going to be many years because I'm looking at 6 commentators. And my whole, when you write a commentary, and it's not me, and I'm not trying to give I'm simply representing tradition. That's what I do in all my writings. I'm trying to channel the traditions. And 3 are going to be monistic and 3 are going to be theistic commentators. Now, the 3 are going to be dedicated to the goal would be one's own Atman. And the other 3, the goal is Bhagavan. So then if the question is why, there have always been people that don't accept that there's an eternal Isvara. We find it of course, amongst the Greeks, there were materialists. I mean, Plato accepted God and Aristotle accepted God, but there were materialistic Greeks that said, no, we don't need to have a prime mover. Let matter itself move itself. Let it be the case that matter just has that, just like you want to say God is like a magnet and that's its nature. And so God, Aristotle, and therefore its nature is it makes things move even though it doesn't do anything. Well, why can't nature itself be a magnet? So there have always been those that will present coherent materialistic arguments. And so in the Indian tradition, and then Christianity basically takes over intellectual thinking for 1500 years and does not allow non-theistic, you could even at certain periods of Christianity lose your life. Now in Christianity, you have a soul, but there's God, and there's much less emphasis in Christianity, except for some Gnostics, probably, but there's less emphasis on just describing, experiencing, and that soul leaves the body. So it's different from the body. But there's less emphasis in Christianity on just a spirituality that's only concerned with the soul. The soul is there, but it's always understood. Its teleology, its destiny is always understood as being in connection to God. Otherwise, it goes to hell or something else rather unpleasant. So so there wasn't really this rich spiritual culture, at least since Christianity became hegemonic. There hasn't been this rich spiritual culture that's simply been dedicated to an experience of the soul. It's always been dedicated to, yes, the soul is there. Yes, it's not material, but it's always been, it's somehow or other, it only has one option. It either is associated with God. It can't exist in its own nature. That's not been, there were mystics. I'm not saying there's not a few voices here and there that say things that start to sound very much like Patanjali, but they're marginal voices. So therefore, it's unfamiliar to us in the West to think of that in the Indian traditions, a lot of the schools have been, including Patanjali, have been about the end of the journey is experience of the soul. They're not interested in God. But God is still there, distinct being, not in all Indian traditions, but in Vaishnava traditions, which are dominant in India. They haven't been exported to the West. Although Krishnamacharya and Iyengar were Vaishnavas, they just never taught that aspect of their tradition. And so certain Shaivite, not all, certain Shaivite and Vaishnava traditions are theistic. You pick up you experience the soul, nothing wrong with that. And they, accept Patanjali, all of that. But for them, that's not the end of the journey. They're interested in what Christians actually are interested in, an eternal relationship with a distinct Godhead. And they have a kingdom of God, not in Prakriti, not made of matter, in Brahman, with forms. God has infinite forms, and the liberated souls are given a form. So if you're interested in that, I wrote a sequel to, it's over there. I wrote a sequel to this. It's called Bhakti Yoga. It's another 500-page book, and it outlines all of this, all the different Ishvara traditions, how Ishvara is understood in the non-dualist traditions, how it's understood in the dualist, all of this. And it's 200-page introduction and then 400 pages of actual, you've got it. So if you look in the table of contents, and go to the introduction section, which is me. I mean, mostly the book is, I want people to read the text themselves, not listen to me. Mind, I'm just trying to give a little map. And then there's a section called Ishvara, Brahman, something like that, Bhagavan, something like that. It's in the introduction, section 4 or something. That will give you all the information about this, Monica. And if you read that carefully and then think about it, then you might still have questions, but they'll be hopefully better informed. You can always drop me an email.
Okay.
Or log on. Maybe I think not next semester, if I can get away with doing online courses for another year, because I love them. I like it because I really like the idea of putting them up for everybody. I'm hoping to do a course on Bhakti Yoga, and that will go. We'll read the Bhagavatam. Any other questions on Patanjali's Isvara?
I have a question.
Yeah.
But, I don't know if I'll be able to express it very well.
Yes.
So, Ruthie.
Who?
Ruthie.
Why is Ruthie? Why aren't you coming up on the screen?
Hold on. No, I'm here.
Okay, there we are, Ruthie. Go on then. Yeah, hi there.
Hi. So I have some trouble understanding the difference between the dual and the non-dual, because it seems I just can't get past the idea that if Tara Justu Svarupi Avastanam, if that's true, and then once you realize your own nature, you realize that there's only consciousness, then how can there be a dual? Surely it's suggesting right at the beginning that it's an illusion. So
No, Patanjali never uses the language of illusion. That's the language of Shankara Advaita Vedanta. But I see your point, and it's a valid point. Yes, when you're in the state of Svarupa Vastanama, is a non-dual experience. Non-dual means you're only aware of self. If you're aware of self, Sva, then you're not aware of anything else. If you're not aware of anything else, there's no duality.
Yeah.
So you're neither aware of the world of matter, nor are you aware of other Atmans. Right. But the way but Sankhya would say, just like you could have 2 light bulbs in the same room, or 100 light bulbs, but let's go with 2. And each light bulb fills up the whole room with its light. But that doesn't mean that another light bulb can't be filling up the whole room at the same time. So therefore, the Atman could be having a non-dual experience, but that doesn't mean that all Atmans merge. That's number one. They could be, Sankhya would say, there's an infinity of Atmans. And let's imagine they all become liberated. They wouldn't merge. That's Advaita Vedanta would say that, not Sankhya. They would all be individuals just having their Svarupa experiences. Okay, so far so good. Now, theistic Vedanta would totally accept that. But they would say, okay, you could do that. But there's at the same time, there's, even Patanjali says there's a Purusha Vishesha. There's another Purusha. Nothing about merging. He's a Purusha Vishesha. So there's another Ishvara called God. Now, if you're a Sarupe Vastanam, you're not conscious of God. That doesn't mean God's not there. The fact that you're having a non-dual experience doesn't mean that there's not other things out there. Prakrity's still there. It's just that you're not conscious of it anymore. It's not that if you become enlightened now of a Sarupa experience, it's not that Prakriti just magically disappears. It's Patanjali said it's there for everybody else. So what does that mean? That means whatever you're conscious of, you're not conscious of things that are still there. Specifically, Patanjali says matter's still there and Ishvara's still there. So then then someone could say, well, hang on a minute. Okay, I could do this. I could have a Sarupe Vastanam experiences. It would be non-dual. But what's this Ishvara? What? And so then such a person might encounter traditions that say, well, actually, whatever bliss you get in your Svarupe Vastanam experience, which is non-dualist, is nothing compared to the bliss that you can get with a relationship with Bhagavan.
Right.
So then a person might say, oh, that sounds interesting. I better do a bit of Svadhyaya here. Check that out. Okay?
Yeah.
So you could have a non-dual experience, but that has nothing to do with what is out there, what exists or doesn't exist. It's just that you're not conscious of it.
Cool. Thank you.
Welcome. Any more questions before we dive into the Gita? So let's again, we're not gonna we're just gonna go straight into the bhakti. Let's go and see who Krishna says he is. And we'll begin at chapter 4. And I sent you all these chapters. and I hope they were made available to you. Teresa, are you there? Therese? We've lost our hosts.
No, I'm here. We were on mute.
They snuck away for a cuddle and a cup of tea.
No, I had to unmute myself.
Oh, okay. It's, online classes, you never know who's there. They're all these black boxes.
Yeah.
And then you say, okay, Sunit, your turn. What is this? And then all of a sudden there's a silence. Okay, book 4.
Were you going to ask if I sent the chapters out?
Yes.
I did.
So the chapter kicks off, and Krishna says, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, I proclaim this yoga. Now, here he's not talking about Patanjali and Chittavritti Nirodha yoga. He's talking about karma yoga, action yoga. We don't have time to get into that. There's 2 types of yoga in the Gita. Not 3 or 4, and other people say there's 3, and some people say there's 4. That's much. The actual text itself says there's 2, just as a point of information. So I proclaim this imperishable yoga. Imperishable, it's eternal, right? These are knowledge systems in the Indian traditions are understood to be eternal. They're manifest, because creation is cyclical. So there's creation, dissolution, creation. But these Ishvara is eternal, and so knowledge about Ishvara is also eternal. It manifests at different times in different places. But the actual just as Ishvara is eternal, well, logically, knowledge about Ishvara is also eternal. But it might get injected in. Even Patanjali says, I'm the guru of the ancients. So it gets injected in at time and place. So he said, well, I spoke this yoga way back when, the beginning of of creation, essentially. Vivishvat. Vivishvan is Surya. When you do Surya Namaskar, that's Vivishvan. Another name for Surya is Vivishvan. He's a celestial being. So the Hindu universe is full of it's not just a bunch of inanimate rocks out there. The Indian universe and Buddhist and Jain, the entire universe is animated. But beings are karmically trapped by their bodies and can only see what their bodies allow them to see and their senses allow them to see. So for example, an ant, imagine there's an ant on the table there in front of you. Well, that ant doesn't know it's on a table. It doesn't know you're sitting right next to it, looming over it. It doesn't know it's in a house. It doesn't know it's in a city that's connected to the world in global trade. What does it know? It just sees color, white, shape, maybe, and it scuttles along looking for a breadcrumb. Why so? Because it's cognitively trapped and sensually trapped by its karma. So the Indian traditions see us like that, despite our hubris, and we think we're, so smart. So just as the ant only sees white and shape and texture, so we think there's a dead universe out there. The Indian tradition would rather suggest that the entire universe is animated, but we karmically can see nothing other than our karma allows us to see. So that allows us to see rocks or whatever it is that we see. I mean, take it or leave it. It's up to you what you want to believe in. My job is to tell you how to explain this verse. So there are celestials in the world of the Gita. And Krishna says, I spoke this to Vivishvan at the beginning, right at the beginning of creation of the universe. And Vivishvan gave it to Manu, and Manu said, don't worry about that. But what's the point? The point is Sutra 2, verse 2. This is not Sutra, it's Shloka. Sutra is prose, minimalistic. Shloka is verse, 8 syllables per line, right? So this verse, for example, Evam parampara praptam, 8 syllables. Imam rajar shayo viduhu. Why is it a Gita? Because it's sung. What does that mean it's sung? Well, this is what it sounds like when you sing it. Sakale neha mahata. It's hardly a song. There's only 3 pitches. But it's still called Gita. Ga, ga, ga. You recite the old Vedic mantras. But even though there's only 3, ga means to Gayatri. Ga is the Gita, is to sing. So anyway, is to recite things in these 3. Song is not a good term for it, really. Song of God, because Ga is to recite things in these 3. What would you call notes, or is it a pitch? I don't know. Whatever it is. So after a long time on earth, 4:2, the yoga's been lost, says Krishna. Action yoga. So what's the Gita all about? What's Patanjali all about? Inaction yoga. Were you doing Chitta-Vritti Nirodha? You're inactive. Then Gita says, well, you know, that's okay, but there was another yoga that got lost. Action yoga. That's what the Gita is all about. We're not going to look at that in this workshop. But the Gita is about karma yoga, bhakti yoga. Those are action yogas. Chapter 5 and 6 is Patanjali yoga. Krishna accepts it. He just says, Arjuna, that's not for you. So, 3. This ancient yoga is declared by me to you. What did Patanjali say? Guru Purvesham Kalana Vijedat. He's the guru of the ancients because he's not affected by time. Well, we could read this through that lens. Krishna says, I spoke it to Vivaswan aeons earlier, not affected by time. Arjuna's going to get confused, as we see, because he thinks, what are you talking about? You told Vivaswan, you're here with me, you're trapped by time. And Krishna says, oh, no, I'm not. But let's get to that. Right. So the job of this workshop is to make these linkages. So he says, well, so it got lost, verse 2, and now verse 3, and now I'm telling you because you're my bhakta, and I love you. That's Arjuna's only qualification. He's not a yogi. He's not a Sanskrit pundit. He's not a Chitta-Vritti Nirodha virtuoso. What is he then? A bhakta. Right, so Arjuna gets confused. He says, look, verse 4, your birth was later and the birth of Vivaswan was earlier. Vivaswan is like billions of years earlier, not even millions, billions in Indian time spans, which is quite similar to Big Bang, by the way, because Big Bang, I think, is 14 billion years or 13.8 billion years ago. And the Indian traditions would say that this present cycle that we're in was 8 billion. I know it's not the same as 14, but it's not ridiculously different. Not like Genesis, which says it was in the beginning was 7,000 BC or something. So Arjuna says, well, your birth was later. The birth of Vivaswan was earlier. Do you all have the text, my friends? Please read the text. This is Svadhyaya. We're doing Svadhyaya together. And if there's one thing I hope to get from this workshop for you, is to develop a samskara for Svadhyaya. This is how you enrich in your spiritual journey. Dive deep, turn the bloody telly off, chuck it out. You can get the news on the computer. Go on the computer, half an hour a day, bbc.com, find out what bloody Trump is up to. That's it. What's old Boris doing? Half an hour. That's it. Don't watch telly. It's just Maya. It's just nonsense. It's not going to help you at the moment of death. Not going to help you at the moment of death, my friends. It's all about the moment of death. The Upanishads, the great transit. It's all about that. Turn the telly off and pick up your sacred texts. Half an hour. Start with half an hour, 45 minutes, 1 hour a day. That will transform your life. If you take the text, find your canonical texts. Don't be running around, jumping all over the place, chitta-vrittying, every text. No. To identify your canonical texts. Yoga Sūtras, Bhagavad Gītā, 2, 3, 4, and go deep, not jumping around like monkeys. That's, even Patanjali says that. Kriya, second word, svadhyaya. So I hope these workshops will plant a seed that, this is beautiful. These studies are beautiful. This is your social life. Instead of hanging out and just chattering uselessly in a bar somewhere, talking about the weather or whatever, British pastime. Oh, a bit chilly today, isn't it? Yeah, a bit chilly. Read, study this. Make these your mates. This can be your social life. Because when you hang out with people, what do? Exchange words, right? You don't sit in silence. That's weird. If you go out with a friend and you just sit in silence, weird. You'll be like, okay, see ya. That last time you go out with that friend, right? You exchange words. So these are words. They just happen to be written down. What's the big deal about that? They still go in the mind. They still affect they still become part of your mind. When a word goes into your mind, it's part of your mind. How is it part of your mind? It's a memory imprint. If I said to you, what did somebody say to you this morning? You remember it. So it's in your mind then. If it's in your mind, it's part of your mind. So the whole point of Svadhyaya is feed the mind so much with this that your mind becomes this. This becomes your lens, because we've no access to the world out there except through the lens of the mind. Let's be clear. Kant understood that. Kant, great philosopher. So you get to choose what you feed into your mind then. You want to watch the telly and feed it with rubbish? Good luck. At the moment of death, what are you going to do? Yeah, I didn't finish my episode. Svadhyaya, however, gives us very clear, find whatever tradition, there are lots of beautiful traditions, and mold the lens of the mind around that. Because what else are we going to do? Mold it around a capitalist consumer culture that's just bombarding us with messages about consumption? How's that going to help the moment of death? That's what TV is, just rubbish. So Arjuna says, that's my little spiel for the day. Probably not the last one. How is this possible? You declared in the beginning. So now Krishna, this is a moment for Krishna to reveal who he is. The blessed Lord spoke. See, that's another example. Why is he translating it blessed Lord? That sounds so Christian. That's not what Bhagavan means. Bhagavan means the possessor of all qualities. All qualities, not just omniscience and omnipotency and omnibenevolence, which is what Christians focus on, very rightly so, beautiful qualities. But what about omni-beauty? And what's beauty? Form. And what's form? Well, form, visual manifestation. That's what Shiva is, a form. It's not a limitation, nor is it a material form. It's a Satchidananda form. It's a Chitti Shakti form. So that's what Bhagavan means. Bhaga is a form, qualities. Van, to possess. Bhagavan. He's translated it blessed Lord. No, I don't mean to disrespect Winthrop Sargent. He's did a great job with this, and I always use it for workshops. But occasionally I have to say something, and here I am saying it. Blessed Lord is unfelicitous translation of Sri Bhagavan. Okay, Bhagavan means Krishna standing there in a beautiful form, blue, translucent, standing in front of Arjuna. It's not, this is Krishna speaking here, and he's called Bhagavan because he has all bhagas, all qualities. So Krishna says, the blessed Lord spoke. Oops, there I'm saying it. Sri Bhagavan spoke. Many of my births have passed away. And yours also, Arjuna, but I know them all. You do not know them. Why don't we know our births? Because the kleshas and karma, tamas, really. All of them, we have memories, actually. Patanjali is going to say that one of the siddhis in chapter 3 is you can actually accomplish yogi who's not trapped. We're trapped by the portion of our minds that are activated for this life. We have the same psychic body, the Sharira Linga, that we've had in infinite births. The body changes, the gross body changes, but it's not just the Atman that reincarnates, the psychic body also reincarnates. Two things reincarnate, distinct from each other. One, the actual Atman is who the source of consciousness. And the other is it's kind of like spacesuit that allows it to function in Prakriti, the psychic body. Just like you have a spacesuit or a deep sea diving suit allows you to function in an alien environment. So that's what the psychic body is. And then according to the nature of the psychic body and the actions that it triggers, it then gets a gross body to allows it to experience gross environments. Okay, the senses, then sense objects. So why don't we remember? So when we're born, all of those past lives are covered by tamas. Just when we know that. I mean, even in this life, we can't remember what we ate for breakfast when we were 3 years old, but we know we did. And yoga tells us it's imprinted. And occasionally we have a deja vu or something, and it pops back into mind. Anyway, okay. So Ishvara is not subject to the gunas. Krishna says, but gunas don't affect me. Patanjali says, klesha karma doesn't affect me. So therefore Ishvara can enter. So what's his birth then? Our births are karmic, not Ishvara. Ishvara appears to take birth. but we didn't get there yet. So many of my births, so-called apparent births, have passed Arjuna, and also yours. But I know all of mine because I've not been trapped by the gunas, and my memories, for us are, our memories of past births are covered by tamas. Not so Bhagavan. He's not covered by the gunas in the first place. You do not know them, Arjuna. Now he's going to say, although I am birthless, Ajo Pisa, and everybody look at the Sanskrit. Don't be afraid of the Sanskrit. I actually have a t-shirt made. I had a student, somebody in a workshop. I kept saying, don't be afraid of the Sanskrit. Don't be afraid of the Sanskrit. And one day I went back to that studio and someone made me a t-shirt. Don't be afraid of the Sanskrit. Don't be afraid of the Sanskrit. It's Indo-European. It's the same language family, my friends. Don't be afraid of it. It's not some just hieroglyphics etched into a tablet. It's living, it's alive. Actually, there are schools, not yoga's tradition, but there's a school that says the Sanskrit language is alive, that Om, just as Om manifests Ishvara, is not a sound representing Ishvara, is Ishvara. That Om, it splits up into the phonemes of the Sanskrit alphabet. Those phonemes of the Sanskrit letters then form into names, which are the objects. And then so in that sense, the Sanskrit language is sort of vibrationally, Om is present, pervading these phonemes and pervading the words that come out of those phonemes, and then the syntax and the grammar that puts the phonemes together to make sentences. All of that's pervaded by Satchidananda Brahman. And so I'm not saying everyone says this, but there is a yogic school of grammarians. Their yoga is to study grammar. That's their yoga. Like other yogis chant mantras, other yogis do what, Chittavritti Narodha, bhaktas do, bhakti stuff. Grammarians study Sanskrit as a sadhana, as a means of accessing Om through the Om's presence in the phonemes that become words that get arranged into sentences of the Sanskrit language. So don't be afraid of the Sanskrit, even if you're never going to learn it. Just let your mind be absorbed in it. It's like a mantra. You may not even know what it means. But, in kirtan, don't you feel joy from the kirtan? And you may not even know what the mantras mean, but it doesn't mean they don't have an effect. So Sanskrit has an effect, is what I'm saying. So, although I am birthless, verse 6, and my nature is imperishable. What nature? My being. Avyaya Atma. Avyaya. I never deteriorate. Atman is eternal. So somehow, like Purusha Vishesha, Patanjali, special kind of Purusha is eternal. Is a being made of pure consciousness. Being here. I'll say that again. These forms are made of pure consciousness. They're not made of pure consciousness. They are pure consciousness, but they take these wonderful forms. Not that they take them. They are. Because if you take them, it means you're something else, and then you take a form. These forms are eternal. They are part of the divine essence. Just like Christian theologians would say, omnipotence is part of the divine essence, the esse. Omniscience is part of the divine essence. So beauty is part of the divine essence in Hinduism. And that beauty is form. It's part of the divine essence. Infinite forms, because God must be infinite. If it's just one form, it's a limitation, and God must be unlimited. Don't think this is polytheism or Hindu mythology. I mean, you can think that if you want, but even if you want to think that, be aware there's very, very rich theologizing behind all this, just as there is in Christianity. You've got 2,000 years still going on here at Rutgers Philosophy and Religion Department here. Brilliant philosophers. And in their private life, they're Christians. And they're applying, that's what a theologian does. You apply a philosophical category of your day and age. For us, it's science and all of that. And you apply it in to support your spiritual convictions. You can't prove it, but you can at least defend it and make it respectable. That's what a theologian does, gives respect to a tradition. So India has its theologians that do that. For Shiva, for Vishnu, for Krishna. Amazing intellectual. It's not, don't think this is all just rural folk simplistic stuff. So although I am birthless and my nature is imperishable, here it is, Ishvara. Look at the second line, because now we've decided we're not going to be afraid of the Sanskrit. Bhutanam Ishvaro Pisa. I'm the Ishvara. In the Krishna Leela, we're going to read the story if I stop ranting. And Yashoda's chasing little Krishna, and she says, and then the author says, and that Ishvara, who is the Ishvara of the epics and of Patanjali and of the Vedas, she thinks that Ishvara is her own little child because of the Yoga Maya. So this is Patanjali's Ishvara. Krishna says, by the way, I'm Ishvara. Because for me, Patanjali didn't want to specify. He wanted to have a Ishvara that would be acceptable to Shaivites and Vaishnavites. And if you start saying Krishna's Ishvara, then, well, what the Shaivite's going to say, well, hang on a minute. Well, Shiva is Ishvara. The Indian traditions are, the difference between the sects. It's not like the Vaishnavas say Shiva is a false religion. Not like that. The difference is only this: they accept each other. The Shaivites accept Vishnu, the Vaishnavites accept Shiva, the Krishnaites accept Shiva and Vishnu. The issue between them, and this is not only an issue for the scholastics of the sect, not for the, not common, but not for the average person. The difference is who's the causal Ishvara, the ultimate causal Ishvara from which other Ishvaras manifest. They all accept the reality of all the Ishvara forms, but the scholastics will disagree with each other about who is the causal Ishvara. Is it Shiva from whom Vishnu manifests, and then Krishna manifests from Vishnu, a second-tiered derivation? Or is it Vishnu, Narayana as the supreme, and then Shiva is manifest when Vishnu needs to destroy the universe, he manifests himself in the form of Shiva, but Shiva's derivative? Or is it Krishna, who doesn't have to do any work at all, because God shouldn't have to do any work, like creation and destruction? That's a job. Well, if you have a job, then you're trapped in the job. Then how are you supremely independent then? So Krishna would, so the Krishnaites would say, well, creation, well, let Vishnu do that. Destruction, okay, Shiva, right. So Krishna says, and then Krishna, what does he do? He plays and has loving relationship with his devotees. What are you going to do if you're God? You're going to have to lie on Shesha and create for 14 billion years. That sounds a bit boring to me. So what's the difference then? The difference is who is the cause of all causes? Who's the ultimate supreme Ishvara? That's the difference. Otherwise, they accept each other. They're not going, killing each other. Crusades. Oh, let's get boys, let's get them Shivites. Not like that. So here's Ishvara, line 2. Bhutanam Ishvaro Pisan. I am the Ishvara of all beings. But Prakritim Svam Adhishtaya, I control my nature, controlling my nature. I'm not controlled by anything. And Sambhavami Yuge Yuge, and I manifest by my power. He enters the world, controlling his nature, which means what? He decides when he wants to enter in the universe. We didn't get to make that decision. We didn't get to choose to be born here or there, in this body or that body. Do you think a dog got to be, do you think a tree got to choose? Only has one sense. Can't see or hear or taste or touch, can only touch. So, when does Ishvara come? Verse 7. Whenever there's a decrease of dharma. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir. Decrease of dharma. Bharata abhyutanam dharmasya, and the increase in adharma. Tada atmanam sajami. That's when I come. So that's Guru. What did Patanjali say? Guru. Guru comes to teach, comes to establish Dharma. For the protection of the good, 8, the destruction of evildoers, for the sake of Dharma, I am born age after age, after age, after age. Remember, Patanjali is the Guru of the ancients. But that sounds a bit like this, doesn't it? Except Patanjali's writing a sutra. He's only allowed 5 words. 6 words. Those forms, I had to write a letter of recommendation the other day, and it was 200 words, and I wrote 208. And it went, I got this red thing. He wouldn't accept it. 8 words. That's a sutra. So verse 9. Now, this is a very interesting shloka for bhaktas. He who knows in truth my divine birth, not the Atman. It's not that the theists reject Atman. It's just that's not the end of the journey. I hope I'm clear about that. So he who knows in truth my divine birth, Krishna is saying, having left his body is not reborn. He comes to me. Krishna tradition has a very specific sense of what this means to go to Krishna, go to Krishna's realm, go loka. And you get to hang out with Krishna for all eternity. And what do? You steal butter and feed monkeys. What's not to like about that? Where you want to just have Svarupe Vastanam for all eternity? Just have this non-dual, infinite, eternal, okay, Ananda's there, sure. I'd rather steal butter, thank you very much. So so that's 9. Okay, now, so this is Krishna in the Gita. So let's jump to that. Now let's see God on high a little bit. So that's God as teacher, as guru. All right, I come to establish Dharma age after age. Let's have a bit of a look at God as omnipresent, because God has many ultimate, infinite features, remember? Bhaktas are interested in God as beauty. And we'll see in the story, God hides his power and omniscience in bhakti. But let's have a quick look at God with power. Let's jump to 7, because I think I sent you that. And here we see, and we'll jump to verse 3, chapter 7. And I'm just going to fill up my green tea. But we'll start with 3 because it's an interesting verse, and it's kind of in my view, affirming what I've been trying to say, that there's a difference between realizing the Atman and realizing God. I really hope to make that come across, and that my whole next 5 years of my devotional and intellectual life is writing these commentaries on the Gita, using 6 commentaries and really trying to make that clear, because it's not cleared on yoga on the high street, or what they would say here in America, the main street. It's not clear. What is the difference between a non-dual and a dual experience? So verse number 3, and that's fine. It's not clear. No, I'm not saying it's not clear because people, it's just that information hasn't been, yoga's been with us for, since the 60s. I mean, okay, Vivekananda came over the end of the 19th century, but it came over then. But I mean, in terms of as a sort of a high street phenomenon, it's been since the 60s. So and it's mostly been asana. So, everything takes time, and we all contribute in our little ways to transmitting these teachings. That's what that's our ego. That's our ahankara, our aklishta. We hope it's aklishta, benevolent to yoga. And we're always seeking the inspiration of Ishvara, because we really want our asmi to be molded by Ishvara rather than desires and the kleshas. Verse 3, Manushanam sahasreshu, of thousands of people, barely anyone strives for perfection, right? So walk down the main street, thousands of people, barely one is really sort of picking up a spiritual path. So if you are, don't pat yourself in the back, don't be proud, but you're a rare soul, and you know that. If you're a real deep level spiritual seeker, you'll know there's not a lot of people that you can speak to on that level. So, and that's why Sangha, community, is so important. Fellowship to the Christians is very important, because you've got to hang out with people like you. Otherwise, you'll start thinking you're weird. You start thinking you're a loser. And your friends will say, you're no fun anymore. You used to be so much fun. Now now we're going out on a Saturday night and you're sitting there chanting Om to the wall. Then you'll start feeling, well, hang on a minute, maybe I'm a bit weird. Should I should I do something about this? So thousands of people barely know. Krishna is saying, look, know that barely one seeks perfection. Not to make us proud, but just this is the power of Maya. So now, third line, this is the most important line for the point I want to make. Even of the striving, that those are on the path genuinely, but haven't got there yet, and the perfected. Who are the siddhas? The siddhas are those who have Swarupa Vastanam, Samadhi Siddhir, Ishvara Pranitana. Siddha is someone who has had a Swarupa Vastanam experience. So even those, look at the last line, scarcely anyone knows me in truth. So what is this saying? There's a distinction between the Atman and the Swarupa of the Atman and Bhagavan. So bhaktas don't want to get off the train at the Atman. They want to stay on till the end of the journey. Because Bhagavan is the source of all bliss. The Atman is a tiny spark. Of course it's got Ananda in it because a spark has the heat and light of the fire. That's what a spark is, an anksha. But how much more heat and fire in the fire, heat and light in the fire itself? So therefore, that's why the bhaktas, not that they reject the Atman, maybe they even have, there's no reason why. There's plenty of stories of bhaktas have had a Swarupa experience and then keep going, like Shukra in the Bhagavatam. Vyas, where do they keep going? That's the source of it all. So hardly anyone knows me in truth, says Krishna. Contemplate that, my friends. Right, now then he goes on, now we've got God on high. Verse 4, earth, water, fire, air, right? This is Sankhya. Ether, mind, intellect, and egoism. This is just my prakriti, he says. It's my prakriti. You can divide it in 8 parts, so you can break it down in 24. It doesn't matter. There are different ways of breaking it up. 8 basic parts. Sankhya takes it a bit further, 24. It's the same thing. I'm not saying different things. It just depends how you want to divide it. 5. This is my inferior nature. Why is it inferior? It's achit, doesn't have chit. So it's inferior. But no, it is different from my higher nature. What's the higher nature? The self. Why is it higher? Chit, it's got consciousness. What's higher? A non-conscious, would you rather be a stone? Or would you rather be a cat looking out the window consciously? So that's why it's higher and lower. One is something higher has got something lower doesn't have. So what is it that the jiva has that prakriti doesn't have? It has chetana, chitti shakti. It's conscious. So that was the highest nature, the self, O Arjuna, by which this world is sustained, right? It's the life force is coming from the Atmans. So things are alive, like blades of grass and flowers and trees and animals and insects, because they're pervaded by the Atman. Take all the Atmans away and you just have dead rock, like we think, like how we perceive the rest of the universe as being. Even though these traditions would say wrong. Verse 6. All creatures have their birth in this, my highest nature. Understand this. I am the origin and also the dissolution. There is an Ishvara behind it all, according to Gita, of the entire universe. Okay? Nothing higher than me exists, O Arjuna. On me, all this universe is strung like pearls on a thread. Why this metaphor, pearls on a thread? If you're wearing the pearls around your neck, a kid could look at that and say, well, your pearls are magically like just sort of, glumming together. Of course they're not. There's a thread keeping them together. So that's the idea. To look at this universe and say it's just inanimate, random particles and forces like electromagnetism and gravity and subatomic entities and just somehow or other, it all came together and formed this universe from a wisdom point of view is absolutely just a silly, it's such an implausible thing to entertain. So therefore Krishna says, look, I am behind it all. Nothing higher than me exists, 6, 7, like pearls on a thread. 8. I'm liquidity. And now we get a long list. This is kind of like God as, in Western philosophy, we have sort of immanent and transcendent. So transcendent is the idea of God on high, right? But like Aristotle, like transcendent has nothing to do with the world. So when we want to think of God as beyond, our day-to-day little machinations, and we might say transcendent. God is immanent. And of course, some people just focus on immanent and say God is just immanent. And some say God is just transcendent. The Gita says, well, it's everything, immanent and transcendent. So for example, not the deists, what were they called in 19th century? They said God was the universe. The deists say God just winds it up and walks off and leaves it. It just leaves it going by itself, right? So kickstarts it, Big Bang, that's it. And then the rest just goes by. He just winds it up in such a way that it unfolds in the way it does. Those are the deists. So he's transcendent. Deism is transcendent. But then there's the school that say the immunists, and I always forget their name. But Krishna is saying, on the one hand, the previous verse, he's immanent. Everything comes from him. And here he's saying, but I'm also immanent. I'm the liquidity in the waters, radiance in the moon. Here he is, Om. I'm Om. Did we read that in Patanjali, perhaps? Tasya vachakaha pranavaha. He's the sound Om. I'm the sound in air, the manhood in man. I'm the fragrance of earth, brilliance in the fire, the life in all beings, austerity in ascetics. Know me to be the primal seed, intelligent of the intelligent. He goes on, the might of the mighty, and 12. And I am the sattva, rajas, tamas. Know that they proceed from me. 13. All this universe is deluded by those three states of being, sattva, rajas, tamas. We can only see what our gunas allow us to see. Go back to the ant. Ant's not seeing this table with the books on it and the computer on it. What to speak of this house, what to speak of this country, what to speak of global trade. Gunas, karmically limited. Maybe sees color, we don't know. If it sees the same thing that we call color, we don't know. Why do we think we're different from the ant? They would, they would say there's celestials looking down on us. That but we can't see. But why? Because of the gunas. We're trapped by our gunas. Well, liberation is what? Liberation from the gunas. Patanjali talks about it as kleshas. It's just working the same thing, really, just different ways of thinking the same thing. What does Patanjali say is the scene? It's prakasha, kriya, sthiti, it's the gunas. All this universe is deluded by these three gunas. Composed of the gunas. These qualities here means gunas. It does not recognize me. Well, gunas doesn't let us. It's like wearing a blindfold. You got, or like wearing sunglasses. You see everything as brown. It's a lens. The minds are lenses. Consciousness is only seeing what the lens allows it to see. Ant has its lens. Elephant has its lens. You and I have a lens. And we only can see, because what is that lens? Karma makes that lens based on our past activities. What is yoga? We're trying to change the lens. We're trying to change the way we look at reality. That's why Svadhyaya is so important. Svadhyaya changes that lens. How does it change the lens? It's importing some wisdom samskaras into the mind. So then the lens is nothing other than samskaras. The mind is nothing other than samskaras. It's not some other thing. It's a container within which samskaras sit. And we look at the world through those samskaras. So we get to choose what samskaras. You want to watch telly? Why do you think I ranted about telly? Because you're importing all that Maya samskaras. And then naturally you look at the world that way. You start thinking about romance, all the nonsense, right? All the movies, people fall in love and all this ridiculous. We were walking down thinking, oh, could this person be my soulmate? Oh, maybe it's this one. You're just walking down the street. And then you walk past someone. Could that be my soulmate? This is nonsense. Where's that come from? The telly. That's where it comes from. So we're trying to change that. That's what Svadhyaya is. You study and then you'll see the nonsense. See how nonsense that is. You see, everything's temporary. Everything's imperfect. Everything, we're Atman. There's another way of being in the world. And Svadhyaya really helps us change that lens. such that that lens becomes sattvic first of all. Well, eventually we have to go beyond the lens. That's a lot, that's way down the road. But at least we start to make this, the lens sattvic and wise, and begin to see the world in a different, instead of a place of pursuing desires. Patanjali say, bhoga pavarga. Instead of seeing as a place of constantly running around trying to find one desire after another, it becomes a place through which we can actually realize our true nature by seeing it correctly, seeing its temporary nature, seeing the temporary nature of the world. We realize we don't belong here. And the only thing we can find here is temporary, and that's never going to satisfy us because we're eternal. It's very simple. Parinama, Patanjali calls it. Why is everything sarvam dukkam for the vivekinaha? Why is everything frustrating? Why does a wise person realize everything is frustrating? Because everything's parinama. It's temporary. All right. So because of these lenses, we're covered by the gunas, right? We don't recognize Bhagavan. Krishna says, I'm higher than these, and I'm eternal. And by the way, bhakti is all grace. You can never conquer Bhagavan. You can have a Svarupe Vastanam experience by your own ego and willpower. You can attain the Atman, a vision of the self, by your own sheer determination, by narodering the mind, not bhakti. When we do bhakti, we're not trying to capture Isvara in the same way as you can actually capture him, in the sense you narodaha your mind, and then you have to have that experience. As long as you did it all, as long as you followed the techniques and you really, really 100% nirodhahat, there is no choice. The mind is nirodhahat, consciousness will just manifest in its own nature. Because consciousness has to be conscious. So when you remove all objects, that's what yoga is. And once you removed all objects, what's consciousness going to do? It has no choice. It has to be it's no objects to be conscious of. So what is it going to be conscious of then? Itself. You can do that by sheer willpower. That's what yoga is. It's tapas. But not bhakti. When we do bhakti, what are we trying to do? We're trying to we hope to attract the attention of Bhagavan. Then Bhagavan will give grace and manifest. Bhagavan's completely independent. He can't be captured by pathetic little minds. So therefore, bhakti is a grace. So, 14. Divine is this illusion of mind, daivihi yashaguna mai, and difficult to penetrate. You can't penetrate. It's Krishna's Shakti. That's why he says, only those who resort to me, this is Ishwar Pranidhana, transcend this illusion. You can't break out of it, my friends. We're trapped. We're trapped with these bodies, trapped with our personalities, trapped with death looming and old age. Don't think of that as depressing. It's not depressing. It's supposed to be a wake-up call. Contemplating death and old age is only depressing in a materialistic society. In a materialistic society, if you go to your therapist and say, oh, I'm just thinking about death and life is suffering, sarvam dukkam, right? All is suffering. They'll give you antidepressants. Not in a Vidya society. Vidya society is very healthy to think about death, provided one is using that contemplation to further deepen one's understanding that I am eternal. I don't have to identify with that. And not just theoretically, okay, I'm an Atman. No, that's not going to happen. But engage in deep level practices that bring us to a place of experience of that self. And in bhakti, then it's a surrender to Bhagavan. And the bhakti simply depends on Bhagavan to provide. Krishna says, Dadami buddhi yogam tvam, I'll give you the knowledge. You want siddhi? You want samadhi? Ishvara can give you that. Bhaktas don't want it, but Ishvara can give it to you. He says it in the Gita. We don't have time to read those verses, but we read it in Patanjali. If you want bhakti, then Ishvara can give you that too. But that's going to be 100% pranidhana. Not like my guru would always say, 50-50. He says, you're all 50-50. Aap log sa 50-50 wale hai. He couldn't speak any English. Aap log sa 50-50 wale hai. Aisa kuch nahi milta hai. You will not get anything. You want 50-50, you get nothing. He used to call us 50-50. Verse number 15. Now we're going to skip. No, we're going to go to 19. 7:19. At the end of many births, Bahunam Jammanamante Gyanavam Mam Prapadyante Vasudeva Sarvamiti. Sa Mahatma Sudula. Who's a Mahatman? At the end of many births, the man of wisdom resorts to me. Maybe we start off seeking our Atman or mindfulness or sattva or, all of this other stuff. It's all good. It's all spiritual in some sort of way. But ultimately, grand finale in the Gita is the Bhagavan at the end of many births. The man of wisdom. So there was a man or woman of wisdom. It's been a man or woman of wisdom for many births. What does that mean? Being a man known about the Atman, pursue the Atman, try to be benevolent, all that good yogic stuff. But it may take many births to realize what? Vasudeva Sarvamiti. But hang on, there's a Bhagavan behind all this. And that Bhagavan is everything. Krishna is everything. Such a great soul is hard to find. You find plenty of people seeking their Atmans, seeking their innermost being. But I mean, real, not just some superficial theism. They go to church and ask, gimme, gimme, gimme. Not that. That's just cultural theism. But actually really deeply, completely surrendered to Bhagavan. How many? Handful. Handful in Christianity. Handful in Islam. They're there. Handful. Handful in Hinduism. He says it right here. Such a great soul is hard to find. So decide what you want to be. If you're going for this, well, so what if it takes a few lives? As long as you're completely dedicated to the path, then Krishna says at the end of chapter 6, you pick up next time, you pick up where you left off. You don't go back and start all over. That's not a bad deal. That's a good reason why to do as much as you can in this life, even if you don't feel you're going to make it. Because otherwise you might think, oh, I'm not going to make it. Why bother even starting? If someone says to you, oh, you climb that mountain, and you think, oh, I'm never going to get up there. I'm not even going to bother. Well, but Krishna says, no, climb it, get halfway. Next life, you start off halfway. Okay. So I want to quickly read a story with you, but I want to look. Krishna reveals this horrific battle-like. Ishvara has infinite forms, but one of them he reveals to Arjuna. It's kind of grotesque, not grotesque, but it's very warrior appropriate. These forms are appropriate to context. So Ishvara manifests as Shiva for those who adore him in that form. Krishna. I'm a Krishna bhakta, so that's the form that I adore. And, the goddess has beautiful forms, Devi, and so forth. So for whatever reason, he shows this form to Arjuna. I don't want to spend more than 15 minutes on this because we only have half an hour after this to read the other story. But go to chapter 11, please. And we'll start with chapter 3. It's really cold. I got to stick another log in the fire. Problem is the fire's in the other room. And this is an old house. It's old by American standards. It's 1750. So it's British, actually. This was a British. I always joke with my American friends, I'm coming to reclaim the colonies for the crown. This is 1750. This house was actually built by British. So 11:3. So then Arjuna says at the last two lines, I desire to see your divine form, a particular divine form. Obviously, Krishna is standing there, so he's seeing the divine form of Krishna. But he wants to, the text doesn't really explain why this form. Doesn't explain that. And as I say, I'm working through these 6 commentaries. I'm only on chapter 3, but hopefully when we get to chapter 11, some commentator will say something about why does Arjuna want to see this form? But I want you to get a sense of something. The reason we're reading this is I want to make a connection when we read our story from the Bhagavatam with something that's going to be central to this. So verse 4, if you think it's possible for me to see it, O Lord of yogins, Yogeshvara, you're the Ishvara of yoga. Look at the third line, Yogeshvara, the Sanskrit. You're the Ishvara of yoga. Well, we know that from Patanjali. Then show me. So then Krishna shows him, behold, Arjuna, my forms, 100-fold, 1,000-fold, various divine and various colors and shapes. I'm going to go quite quickly, so be ready to flick over pages. We're on 5, 6. Behold, these are all celestial beings, the Adityas, the Vasu, the Rudras, 7. Behold the entire universe. Remember that for the next story. With everything moving and not moving, standing together in my body, Arjuna. Whatever else you desire to see. And then he says, 5, but you're not able to see me with your own eyes. I give you divine eyes. Our eyes are prakritic. They can only see prakritic objects. Instruments are made to perform specific functions, right? A knife is made to cut. It's can't, you can't sort of paint with it, or maybe you can. But so eyes can only see sense things made of prakritic elements. Let's put it that way. Indriya and can only see things made of the Mahabhutas. So he's saying you need divine eyes. What does that mean? Consciousness needs instruments to see. If it's going to see prakritic things, it's given a prakritic form. But if it wants to see divine, we need to get our Atman doesn't have senses. It needs to be given divine eyes, divine body. So and let me take a moment here. What's liberation for this kind of theism? To get a divine body to interact with God eternally, with divine senses. Bhaktas want relationship. They don't want to just Svarupe Vastanam, infinite non-dual experience. They reject that. They don't reject it as a possibility. They reject it as something they're not interested in. So what do they want? Divine forms. Where is that? Look, the divine eyes. They want to see God, touch God, taste God, the gopis. They want to kiss Krishna. So behold my majestic power. Verse 9, having spoken thus, O king, the great lord of yoga, again, Yogeshvara, Maha Yogeshvara. Look at the second line, Maha Yogeshvara. Hari revealed to Arjuna his majestic. This is Aishwarya. This is important because when Krishna, in the Leelas we're going to read after this, Krishna hides his majesty, hides it, because he doesn't want to blow the minds of his devotees. Here he's revealing his majesty. I'll say it again, so please pay attention to this to understand the story that's coming after this. Here he's revealing his majesty. Aishwarya is from Ishvara. Remember we said Ishvara means power. Aishwarya is God, is just supremacy. In the Leela, Krishna hides, doesn't reveal, hides his majesty, and we'll find out why he does that. 9. And then there's mouths and eyes and all of this. Let's jump. All of this kind of warrior-like. And this is what Oppenheimer, he read the Gita, and when he detonated the atomic bomb, verse 12, he recited this. You can look this up. If 1,000 suns should rise all at once in the sky, such splendor would resemble the splendor of that great being. Okay, this is God manifesting majesty. There Arjuna beheld the entire universe established in one, divided in many groups, and then Arjuna was filled with amazement, his hair standing on end, because he just, you know, his body couldn't deal with it physiologically. And so, okay, so that's that. Now let's jump, because then what happens? He doesn't like this form. He doesn't like it. And he goes, let's go to 33, or 30. You lick up, swallowing on all sides, all the worlds with your flaming mouths, filling all the universe with splendor. You terrible rays blaze forth, O Vishnu, tell me who you are, 31. Terrible of form, namaha to you, namaha, 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 namaha. Salutations to you, have mercy, I wish to he's terrified. I wish to understand you, primeval one, I do not comprehend what you're doing. 12, this is the second verse that Oppenheimer chanted, two of them. Here, time I am, the mighty cause of world destruction, who has come forth to annihilate the worlds. All right, destruction. Even without any action of yours, all these warriors who are arrayed, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so this is the point. So this is a form of majesty. And eventually he says, and what does Arjuna do? Let's go to 40. He starts doing namaha. They were kind of equals before, like his cousin. They were the same age. They were cousins. They were sort of socially equal. Of course, Krishna was special. Everybody knew that. But now his relationship changes because it's very formal. Again, I'm making a point because I want to connect this with the story we're going to read. Salutations is namaha. Namaha to you, verse 40. In front and behind, namaha to you on all sides. You're infinite. You pervade all. And now he starts apologizing, 41. Whatever I have said impetuously, as if in ordinary friendship. He said, I didn't know who you were. And we were hanging out. We were buddies. Whatever I said in French, you know, I might have said, oh, Krishna, or son of Yadu, or comrade, I thought you were my cousin. I thought you were a Yadu in the Yadu lineage. In ignorance of your majesty, through negligence, I didn't know who you were, or even through affection. And 42, and if I cracked the odd joke, and if with humorous purpose you were disrespectfully treated, while at play or resting or seated or alone, blah, blah, blah. Last line, for that I ask forgiveness. Now he asks forgiveness. His friendship is destroyed. What does this really mean? His love is shattered and becomes replaced by awe, majesty, and fear. Read the Old Testament for a bit of that. And when you really know who God is, you can't have a loving relationship. That's the theology that becomes central to Krishna bhakti. If you really know who God is, you're like Moses going up the mountain terrified, or you're like, you know, Ezekiel. I don't know how you pronounce that. It's all fire and all awesomeness, not love and intimacy. You need to understand that. God has that. Of course he does. He's God. But God hides that. Why? To allow affection and closeness and love. As we'll see in the Leela. So you're the father or blah, blah, blah. You're the guru. Look, there's guru, third line, right? Patanjali. There's nothing like you. Da, 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 da. And look at 45. My mind trembles in fear, not in love. 45, line 2. My mind trembles in fear. 44. I ask forgiveness. He's, you know. And now he says, show me that form, O God, in which you originally prepared. He appeared. He said, enough of this. He wants to go back to the form that he, with less majesty, being expressed. So then Krishna does that. And 47, the Blessed Lord spoke, by my grace towards you, Arjuna, this supreme form has been manifested through my own power. This form of mine made up of splendor, universal. This is God with majesty. Infinity, what's the Sanskrit? Tejamaya, Vishvam, Anantam, Adyam, Rupam, Paramam, Darshitam. It's never been seen by anyone other than you. And then what does he say? No, but not by Vedic ritualism, not by charity, not by tapas can I be seen in such a form. Well, how can he be seen then? 49. Later on he says, only by bhakti. He's granted, Arjuna asked him, let me see the form. And Krishna said, all right then. Hey, be careful what you ask for. And then he says, here, have no fear on seeing this terrible form. Be again free from fear and behold my previous form. So Krishna conceals his majesty. This is the Krishna that bhaktas want. Having spoken thus to Arjuna in verse 50, Krishna revealed his own previous form. Having resumed his gentle, wonderful appearance, he calmed Arjuna, who was terrified. Not love, no love, terror. You want majesty? Then you can have it, terror. You want love? You have to cover that. And that's Krishna. That's how Krishna is distinct from all other forms of Ishvara. Because Narayana's might, God on high, is mighty. Rama is all about dharma, 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 dharma. Devi's pretty majestic. Don't be messing with Devi. Don't be trying to steal butter from Devi. Kali, even Shiva can't go near her. What majesty? Have a look at Kali. So what's distinctive about Krishna is he hides all of that. And most of all, he hides it when he's a little baby. And then he's mischievous. And that's what we're going to read. So there we are. Arjuna goes, okay, thank you very much. Seeing your form, human form, now I am composed. Now my mind is restored to normal. And what's that normal? He has a loving, affectionate relationship with he loves Krishna. Krishna loves him. Remember, the yoga got lost. I'm telling you, Arjuna, because I love you. He said that. I didn't read that bit. And then 52, Krishna says, no one can see this form, even the gods can't. They're constantly longing. Oh, here's the verse I was going with. Not through the study of the Vedas, 53, nor through tapas, he was repeating it, nor through gifts, nor through sacrifice can I be seen in this form. How can I be seen? 54, very important, bhaktya tvananyaya sakya, only through bhakti. Ahameva vidu Arjuna, can I be known? Okay, you can't get the form from tapas. You can get your svarupa avastanam from tapas. Yes, that you can do, but not a darshan of Bhagavan, not vision of God. No, that's grace, right? Be clear. Make a note of 54. Go back to it after the workshop. Only by devotion. Ananya. Ananya means not 50-50. Not 50. Hare Maharaj, 50-50. And you can say, okay, let's go 90-10. Let's go 9. No, not 90-10. 100%. That's what anyaya means in the first line. Ananyaya, anya. Anya means other, no other. Well, Maharaj, 1%. Please, you give 1%. Not ananyaya, 100. By 100% devotion can I be known. These are the great bhaktas. And what happens then? You make it into Krishna Leela. You get born when Krishna incarnates, and then you get to hang out with Krishna in the Vrindavan, go and play with the monkeys. 100%. By undistracted devotion, that's not a good term. Look at the Sanskrit. Anya means other. Ananya, no other. Can I be known in this form? So, finally, what's the end of the chapter? He who does all work for me, not 99, all. Mat karma kra mat paraho. Where's the only? He doesn't have only here. Mat karma krin, mat paramo, mad bhakta, sangavarjita. Well, that's kind of all. Not attached to anything else. Nothing else. Everything for Bhagavan. You want to have a personal relationship with God? 100%, my friends. And what is it we're giving up? What is that we're giving up? Suffering. The things we cling to cause us suffering. Why do they do that? Because they're temporary. You can't hang on to your relationships. Your sweetheart might walk out the door any minute and say, I don't love you anymore. Your body, you can't even hang on to your body, wrinkles, white hair. What are we hanging on to then, other than sources of suffering? So 100% Bhagavan. He who does all work for me, considers me as the supreme, is devoted to me, abandons all attachment to everything else, and is free from enmity towards any being, comes to me, Arjuna. Okay, now what does that look like coming to Krishna? There we go to our last story, and we have almost half an hour, which is enough time to read the story. I'm just getting my book. Ah, it's so good being when I started my academic career, I was like a closet yogi, and I thought I'd be busted, I thought they'd realize I was really a yogi. Academia's all about being objective and, not supposed to believe in anything. But now I'm at the end of my career, so I'm letting my beard grow and then just being, it's very relieving to let go of those as it was an attachment. That was an attachment. I didn't have full faith in Isvara. I was clinging onto my ego. I thought I need to navigate this. I need to put on this big scholarly profile. And as a result, for 20 years, I was miserable. I was faking it. So that's an example of suffering, clinging onto an attachment, which is just made of mind stuff. It's imagined. So we read this beautiful story, one Leela, and then we'll take questions, my friends. I'll give you whatever time you need for questions, you will have. So we're going to go to the 10th book of the Bhagavata Purāṇa. And so that's page 480. And we're going to connect this with everything. So we've got this minimalistic Ishvara of Patanjali, even though he, gives us a few little tidbits. Okay, he's omniscient, he's the guru. But really, what's his function? Is just someone to give us liberation. If that's what you want, Ishvara will give it to you. We should have read that verse in the Gita. Krishna says, okay, whatever you want. If you want to worship something else, he says, I'll give you the faith to worship that other thing. We should have read that because that's relevant to Patanjali. You want to seek your Atman? Well, I'll give it to you. He doesn't say you'll go to hell if you worship other gods. In the Gita, he doesn't say that. He says, you want to worship other gods? I'll give you the faith. I'll facilitate that. Next time I do a workshop like this, I have to make sure I read that. That's kind of important. Well, anyway, not now. So, verse 12, chapter 12. No, not chapter 12. We're going to do chapter 9. I hope I didn't send you the wrong one. What do you have? Which chapters do you have?
12.
Well,
Oh no! Can I send you it now? Would you be able? Would you put it up for everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I want to, I want to make a connection with everything we did, and I want to leave you on this. I want to leave you in a place where I want to leave you, which is with the sweetest form of bhakti that I think everybody agrees is. Even Shaivites, everybody. No, there's nobody that doesn't love baby Krishna. What's not to love? What's the email? Keen on yoga?
It's info@keenonyoga.co.uk.
Hang on. Info. I'm doing a info. Oh, Keen on Yoga. Right, there we are. So so you'll be able to put it up right away, will you?
I can email it to people.
Would that be okay?
Wait. I can maybe put it in the chat box, I think.
Yeah. Right. So let me just attach. How do I do that?
We did get chapters 12 through 13.
No, I want to do. I made a mistake. I'm so sorry. I really want to do.
Add something.
How do I attach something to this? Reply all. Normally they have an attachment thing. Oh, I have to reply all. That's fine. I just did reply all. Oh, there we are. Okay, attach. Browse the computer. Give me 1 second, please. Sanskrit class. Desktop. Workshop. Bum, 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 bum. Here we are. Bhagavata 10th book. Okay, 8 to 11. That's what we want. 8 to 11. All right, so that's there. And hit send. There.
Okay.
Did it come in?
I'm just checking now.
Yeah.
Yes, it's there.
So you'll be able to.
I'll be able to email it. Yeah.
Excellent.
But it is in the Bhakti Yoga book as well, right?
Yeah. You got the Bhakti Yoga book. Then it is page 4. 70. 2. So while that's coming up, let me just let's just unpack 2 words. So we just saw God in majesty. Now, how do you hide that majesty? You know the term Maya. The term Maya is how the Atman is unaware of itself and imagines its body-mind. So there's a kind of power behind that shift. And that's called Mahamaya, regular Maya. And that's a negative thing. We want to be free of Maya. But there's a wonderful divine counterpart to that called Yoga Maya, which allows us to become closer to God. And how does it allow that? It allows God to, it's the power that allows God to conceal his power and cover everybody, just like Maya covers us in ignorance in the mundane world, but Yoga Maya covers all the Krishna's devotees so they don't know that their beloved Krishna's Bhagavan. And why would they not want to know that? So that they can get really, really close to him. The minute you start knowing he's Bhagavan, well, you saw what happened to Arjuna, you freak out. So that Yoga Maya is the power by which Krishna covers his own potency and covers his beloved devotees so that they can get really close to him, and they covers them so that they don't know he's God. The minute you know someone's God, you become all formal and weird. So that's Yoga Maya. And the other term is Leela. And Leela is God just exchanging loving love with his devotees. Not God on high, not God the creator, not God the bestower of liberation in Patanjali, not the God in the Gita, I am this, I am that, I'm immanent and I'm transcendent. All of that is God, as is the horrific form on the battlefield. That's also God. Death and destruction is part of our reality. So if everything's God, then death and destruction is too. And that was the vision in the 11th chapter. But the ultimate nature of God in the Krishna tradition, God doesn't have a job to do, creator. Vishnu does that, and Shiva destroys it. They're forms of God, they're manifestations of Krishna, and they do that, and that's what they're manifest for. But Krishna, God is pure love. No, and nothing. And those that, and when we become 100% pure Krishna bhaktas, the Krishna tradition, then we get to exchange pure, beautiful, loving relationships. It's just Leela means, and Leela is just fun, mischief. You know, sometimes your mischief is fun, and you know, so that's what a Leela is. God, the nearest thing I could find in English would be pastime, not sport, because sport is competitive. Nothing can compete with God. Not play. You could say play. You know, even pastime is not. It's a bit weird because you don't need to pass time if you're God. There's no time. And plus pastime sort of suggests that you're a bit bored. So so all the words are problematic for Leela, but hopefully by understanding how these words are problematic, we get a deeper theological sense of what Leela does mean. Okay. And its essence is love. God hiding his majesty. Why? Because his devotees want to love him in a certain way. So he serves them. When you get to 100%, the roles flip. God serves the devotees. 99.99, 50, you then pranidhana. You're doing all the work. All the pujas and the japas and the tapas and all the work in bhakti, one way. And God is waiting for that 100%. We're serving. 100% flips. Once it's 100%, God is one, conquered. The unconquerable one is conquered. The 10th book loves to say that. The unconquerable one is conquered by what? Love. And then God becomes subservient to the devotee. That's the beautiful feature. Not Narayana Bhakti, not Devi Bhakti, not Ram Bhakti. So with all that said, those 2 terms, okay? Yoga Maya covers the majesty, and Leela is God at play. So we're on page 472. Can you go to 472? What page are you on? You need to flick over the page, please. Flip over to, can you scroll down? Oh, can I do that? Oh, I can do that. Look at that. Oh, no, I can't. Somebody else is doing it. 472. Yeah, 472. Sorry, my eyes. Can everybody see it? Can you like make it? You can probably fiddle around on your screen, right, to make that big. Is everybody okay?
Yeah.
Okay, left-hand column. When the women, these are the elderly, not the young gopis, not Krishna's beloved, but the mother, they have mother bhav. Bhav is a type of love. So there's different kinds of love, right? Friend love, love of a friend, love of a beloved, love of a mother. They all have their different flavors. These are called bhavs in Sanskrit. Your bhav is the flavor, the type of mind. So they have maternal love. And the experience that comes from that is called rasa. You may have heard these terms, bandied about, bhav and rasa. So when the women found the boys' childhood lila, they're little boys playing with their friends and getting up to, mischief. When they find them worth watching, the ladies of Raj would leave their households and enjoy themselves, looking and laughing as the two were dragged hither and thither by the calves whose tails they had grasped. This is what Krishna Bhaktas want. They don't want Svarupe Vastanam. They want to spend all eternity just beholding God, playing and having whatever their bhav is. They want to have a personal relationship with God for all eternity. And God is infinite. It's not like there's one Krishna and there's a trillion Krishna Bhaktas waiting for their turn. No. When the gopis danced with Krishna, each gopi had her own Krishna. You have your own. This is the infinity of Godhead. So so there's no like standing in line with ticket number 1 trillion, like if you go to some of these temples in India, you wait for 12 hours. You go to Sri Rangam and these big temples down South India, you better pay your 2,000 rupees and get in a quick line. If you stand in a regular line all day, but people will do that. Anyway, let's get back to this. So when the women found the boys' childhood Leela worth watching, the ladies of Raj would leave their households and enjoy themselves, right? They don't want Svarupa Vastana, looking and laughing as the two were dragged hither and thither by the calves whose tails they had grasped. The two, right? Because little toddlers, they're not walking yet. So, toddlers grab hold of things to pull themselves up, and they're just cowherders. So they grab hold of the little calves, and the calves, of course, bolt. And by the way, the calves are great bhaktas. Don't think you can be a calf in Vrindavan unless you've done bhakti for many lives. They're all great beings. The monkeys, everybody. They take those forms to participate in the lila. The two boys were very active, and their play sometimes took them out of bounds. When their mothers could not safeguard their sons from horned or fanged animals, from fire, swords, water, winged creatures, and thorns, nor even perform their household duties, they became very anxious. So this is the defining feature of mother love. It's called Vatsalya Bhav in Krishna Bhakti. The love of a mother always has this little bit of anxiety tinged. Mother is always worried about the child because, anything could happen. And mother, you love your child and because the child is dependent upon you. So you have the role of protector. So there's always this anxiety. I remember when I have a daughter and she was young, even just driving, back of the mind, there's this sort of, well, what if I have a car accident? My beautiful child is sitting in the back dependent on me. So there's always that level of angst. So that's the defining feature of love. That's love. If you didn't have that, that means you wouldn't love, really. Well, maybe it might mean that. So after a short time, right, the story is being told to Parikshit, the king. Balaram, his brother, and Krishna were walking easily in Gokul and no longer had bruised knees. They weren't falling over. That's God. This is Narayana. Covers his majesty. Can't even walk. Falls over, bruises his knees. This is what we love as Krishna Bhaktas. You want to see that thing in the 11th chapter? Good luck to you. Form. Awful. 27. Thereafter, Bhagavan Krishna, along with Balaram, his slightly elder brother, played with the boys of Vraj, Vrindavan. That's where I go to India every year, Vrindavan, between Delhi and Agra. Played with the boys of Vraj of the same age, arousing rapture in the women of Vraj. This is what the Bhaktas want. Not the Ananda of the Satchid Ananda of the Atman. Yogis can have that if that's what they want. Gyanis can have that if that's what they seek. No one's denying that. But this is what we want. The rapture of being God's presence all the time. Not just presence in some throne with cherubims and seraphims, so that might be there too. We're not denying that either. But we want to We want to do this. We want to play with Krishna. Observing the delightful childish activity of Krishna, the gopis gathered and they spoke tongue-in-cheek. So they're going to snitch on Krishna, not because they're mad, but, sometimes when you're in a relationship, you like to sort of spice it up a bit. You tease your beloved and, it's play. It's just Leela. So they're going to play. They're going to try to get him in trouble just to look at his face, right? You want to look at your beloved's face in different moods. Just why not? It's infinite varieties and shades and hues of love. So now you're going to tease. That's a form of love. You tease your beloved. It's a sign of affection. Then you play, and then that's what's going on here. So that's what they call here snitching. And in England, when I was a kid, they called it sneaking. I don't know what they call it now. When I was in school, you sneaking. If you went and told a teacher, it was called sneaking. So they're sneaking on Krishna to his mum. Here is what they say, the gopis. Sometimes he releases the calves at the wrong time, being very naughty, and he laughs when cries of protest are raised. Moreover, he eats the tasty milk and whey. Then he steals. He's a thief. By means of his thieving devices, he climbs on the rice grinding mortar. Look at this. He divides the curds and whey and feeds the monkeys. If he doesn't eat, he breaks the pot. When there's nothing available, he leaves angry, and with the household, he blames the children. So this is God on high, stealing, lying. What else is he doing? Blaming kids for something they didn't do. When he cannot reach, he devises a system to get things by arranging benches and rice husking mortars, because the pots are hanging up for the mice, are hanging up on something. Knowing what has been placed inside the pots, hanging on rope slings, the cunning boy makes a hole in them at the time of day when the gopis are absorbed in household chores. He sneaks in, and he can't reach over the lid of the pot, so he makes a hole in it. And because he doesn't, a child doesn't think, well, if I make a hole, okay, I get my butter, but how am I going to block the hole when I'm done? So there's a big mess now. Look at this. His own body, which bears clusters of precious jewels, his own body functions as a light in a dark house. So even though it's completely abnormal, his body is pure Brahman. It's Satchidananda. It's luminous, self-luminous. But they never think there's something weird about it. Why not? Yoga Maya, that's Yoga Maya. Covers your understanding. So he's saying, look, he comes in, the house is completely dark, but he walks in, it's completely illuminated. Because that's Brahman, it's luminous. He has body made of Brahman. When he's engaged in such audacities, he passes urine and other things. There's a little pee in the corner and a little poo. Can you imagine Narayana doing that? Or Jehovah in the Bible. Imagine in the Bible, God says, the cherubims and seraphims, everybody's going, hallelujah. And he gets down and there's a pee in the corner. This is what Krishna does. That's why we love Krishna. Those of us that do. So there he has a little pee. Where are we? Although his deeds are carried out by theft, he outwardly appears virtuous. He puts on a face like, well, what are you talking about? I didn't do anything. In this way, these affairs were related by the women as they gazed at Krishna's beautiful face with its fear-stricken eyes. Yogamaya. With a smile on her face, Yashoda did not want to scold Krishna because she loves him. So they were enjoying this. Like mothers get together in the park and chat about, well, my little boy did this and he did that, and they relish it. Well, imagine doing that with God. Now we're going to get to the Leela. I want to connect to what we just read in the Gita. So each of these is a Leela. So that one would be butter stealing, makkan chori. Makkan chori. The chori, the stealing of the makkan, the butter. Now we're going to have the universe, I'm not going to tell you, but now we go into another Leela. One more page and we're done. Okay, just read one more page and we're more or less on time, and then we'll take questions. Once when Balaram and the other cowherd boys were playing, they complained to Mother Yashoda, Krishna's eaten mud, so now his friends are sneaking on him. Yashoda was concerned for his welfare. Remember, the maternal love is always an anxiety. So he's eaten mud. And she scolded Krishna, whose eyes seemed to be full of fear. Grasping him in her hand, she said to him, why have you secretly eaten mud, you naughty boy? These young friends of yours are saying so, and so is your elder brother. So now he has another little lie. Mother, I didn't eat any mud. They're all spreading false accusations. If you think they're speaking the truth, then you look into my mouth yourself. Says little, he's still nursing. So how old is he? 4, 3? Probably kids were nursed a bit longer back then, a lot longer. If that is the case, then open wide, she said. Lord Hari Krishna, whose supremacy cannot be constrained. We're reminded who he is. No one can tell him to do anything, but he does out of love. So his supremacy cannot be constrained, but who is God assuming the form of a human boy for play, lila, for love, really, just to please his devotees. He opened wide. And now he lifts the spell of yoga maya, just like Krishna did on the battlefield to Arjuna. Right? Remember that form, all the universes, all of that, time, maya. Look at this. Yashoda saw that the universe of moving and non-moving things, space, the cardinal directions, the sphere of the earth with its oceans, islands, and mountains. She saw raw elements, air, fire, the moon, the stars. Basically, just hitting on some high points of reality. Nowadays, probably say, stuff like, saw all the constellations and whatever we would say nowadays. She saw water, light, the wind, the sky, the evolved, there they are, the constellations. The evolved senses, the mind, the elements, the 3 raw gunas. So all of that. Maybe today we would say, she saw muons and quarks and protons and electrons and the force of gravity and electromagnetic forces. She saw this universe with all its variety differentiated into bodies. The varieties of the universe is just to accommodate karma. The universe is there to accommodate karma. It's not there for its own sake. It's just dead matter. So it's there to provide forms for living entities to try to enjoy. Remember Patanjali, Bhoga Apavarga. Why is the universe there? You want to try and find happiness? Bhoga, fine. But then everything you do generates karma. And you keep getting born again and again and again. When do you stop? When you give up, when you realize there's no happiness to be found. I failed. I'm unfulfilled all the time. I'm always existentially anxious. And then what? Well, then you take the path of liberation. Whether that's your own Atman, well, that's one option, or Bhagavan. So she saw all this. She saw the time factor, nature, and karma. These are laws, just like gravity is a force. We don't know what it is. We just measure it. It's a force. So karma is a force. It's a power that connects. That somehow connects acts with their fruits. I'm having a discussion with an Indian philosopher friend about what exactly is it metaphysically. Different schools pitch it differently. What is this karma? What is it metaphysically? We know what it does. Just like gravity, we know what it does. But what is it? Scientists can't answer that question. You just know what it does. So we know what karma does, but what is it? I think in different schools might have something interesting to say. I'm right in the middle of researching that as we speak. So seeing Vraj, as well as herself in the gaping hole in the body of her son, she was struck with bewilderment. Now, what happens to her love? We saw what happened to Arjuna. Freaks out. Her hair stands on it. Is this actually a dream? Is it a supernatural illusion? She sees the whole universe and the little 4-year-old baby, she's nursing him, and all of a sudden she has this vision, like Arjuna had that horrific one. This is not quite that horrific, but it's pretty mind-blowing. So what is this? A dream? Is it a supernatural illusion? Is it a confusion of my own intelligence? Or is it some inherent power of this child of mine? And now she starts doing namaha like Arjuna does, which means what? Her love is shattered, gone, replaced by fear and awe. Therefore I do namaha to his feet, which are the support of this world. From them and through their agency, this world manifests. She starts to realize who he is. Their true nature cannot be known by the senses, no reason. We can't understand any of this with our senses and reason, the nature of God. That's why we have to surrender, and God will reveal himself. You want Atman? That you can get on your own. You don't have to be a theist to get your Atman. You can be an atheist and experience your Svarupa, not God. So she starts going, he is my refuge. Through his illusory power, I have my ahankara, my asmita, these ignorant notions. So I think I am me, this body, mine. I think this other body, mine's my husband. I think you're my son. This is all Maya. From a jnana position, and forget about bhakti, it's just 101 jnana, just basic first lesson in Jnana school, in yoga philosophy school. You're not the body, right? So he's realizing this. Blah, blah, blah. So 43, now see what happens. Then the omnipotent Supreme Lord cast his Yoga Maya, divine spell. In what form? In the form of maternal love. She has a particular type of love, maternal affection, over the gopi who had come to know the truth. So Krishna wants love. He doesn't want all this namaha, namaha. Bloody boring, namaha, namaha, all eternity. He wants to have a little pea in the corner and steal butter once in a while. Immediately the gopi's memory was erased. And she forgot all about that. And this is Yoga Maya. It's Maya, it's an illusion. But it's a good one. Why is it good? Because look, she sat her son on her lap and returned to a previous state of mind with a heart full of intense love. Yoga Maya allows love because it allows intimacy. You want to know who God really is? Blow your mind. And it's terrifying. And actually, you get a lot of that in the Old Testament. If you look at some of those passages of the prophets that saw God, and you get a lot of that, in any tradition. You get that in Narayan is like that. In some descriptions of Narayan. Okay, so last verse, she considered Hari. Look, we're really punctual. How about that for being British? She considered Hari, whose glories are sung by the Vedas, the Upanishads, Sankhya Yoga, that's Patanjali Sankhya. That Ishvara they read about, started this workshop with. She considered that, him, and the Sattvata sages, she considered him to be her very own son. That's bhakti. Well, I hope you got a little sense of how these texts are linked and, how Krishna bhakti has its own particular form of Ishvara Pranidhana, and of course Shaivas would have theirs, and, you should do workshops with a Shaivite. You can make that come alive for you, and the Durga traditions, and this is real life Ishvara Pranidhana as it's been handed down for the millennia. I don't know what will take root in the West and what won't, but that's a little glimpse at how the Ishvara of Patanjali and the Gita all sort of come to their highest expression in baby Krishna, for example, and other such leelas and Yoga Maya. And so time for you. I'm done. Questions?
Any questions, or are you happy with that?
Juliana?
So I think I'm just asking this to hear you say this one more time. But can we think, or can we use like Patanjali's method to realize God?
Yes, you can do that in the Bhagavata Purāṇa. If in this book, or if you don't have this, I can give you the chapter number. You can do that Nirodha on forms of, there's chapters, the stories of great bhakta, pranidhana, chittavritti nirodha, using that as a method, but they're bhaktas, so they're not just seeking the Svarupa, they actually want to have a vision of Bhagavan, and so they're using chittavritti nirodha not because they believe they can, force God to manifest. You can force your own Atma to manifest. You can make it happen by your willpower, by just nirodhaing the mind. But in the Bhakti traditions, yes, you can. But what you're doing is you're offering your mind to God. You're saying, Bhagavan, it's completely up to you. You manifest or don't manifest. You're completely independently free. So what I'm giving 100%. Remember 100%. And I'm using this practice, this technique, which is your question. I'm using this chittavritti nirodha technique, and I'm surrendering my very mind to the form, to your form. And if you wish to bestow a wonderful vision of yourself, you'll bless my life. If not, you're free, and I simply will remain chittavritti nirodha until perhaps I may gain your grace. That's the mood. That's the mood of a bhakta. No demanding. You're not like, oh, I've been sitting there for 5 lifetimes, mate. Get a bloody move on. It's not like that. It's it's, you know, what else is there to do? Suffer in the world. So I'm surrendering everything. And if you appear, you appear. If you don't, I'm just going to sit here. I'm just going to sit here and do this and wait and trust in your grace, but no demand.
Thanks.
Yeah, so there's stories in the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam is 18,000 verses, and when I did this, I wanted to make a connection with this. And obviously you can see how I'm trying to visually suggest that. And the Gita is going to be the one linking the two, actually. But that's going to take me a few years. It's going to be that's about 1,000 pages. So, but when I chose the stories, because obviously the actual text is huge, I chose the stories of yoga type, the type of practices that were the closest to Patanjali, and because this was meant for the yoga communities, and I knew that, well, your asana is huge, and, you know, meditation. So I'm trying to introduce this sort of Krishna bhakti into that community. So I chose the stories that had the most that Western yogis could relate to, had the most features that would allow this sort of linkage. So therefore, yes, so there were stories about Chitta Vritti Nirodha practices, but with a much, much richer bhakti element, and with the grand finale, it's not just Svarupa. It's not that the bhaktas reject that; they may have that. But they want to keep going, and there's stories of bhaktas who come out of that state and walk away because they don't want to be lost for all infinity. Lost to what? They've gained their real self. They've lost the world. That's a good thing, and with its changing uselessness for someone seeking eternity, it's useless. Anything temporary is useless if you seek eternity. So they've lost that, but they've also lost the possibility of a relationship with God. Because when you're absorbed in your Svarupa, be careful what you choose. You're liberated, you're free, no more suffering, tick all those boxes, and you experience bliss, Satchit Ananda. No one's denying that. But in that state, that non-dual state, there's no room for duality. So where's God then? God, whether he exists or not, you're not going to have any relationship with the Purusha Vishesha in that state. The bhaktas want a relationship. So theism has its, the story of theism in Indian subcontinent is rather different from the story that theism takes from the Greeks and through the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, and then New Testament, and then the theologies of the great Christian scholastics. It's all God. It's all wonderful stuff. I'm really enjoying actually studying. I'm really enjoying because my university just hired probably world's best medieval philosopher, and his specialty is Aquinas, and I'm sitting on the class, and it's just wonderful to see how living entities have struggled intellectually and spiritually to connect to the same being, and how that different tradition, different scriptures have caused their thinking to be filtered in different ways and their practices to be filtered in different ways. So yeah, you can do Chitta Vritti Nirodha for Bhagavan, or if or any form of Ishvara you want.
I was just gonna probably just say something. So when you were saying in the lecture about how people can't conceive of God really, and if you did, you'd be terrified. So then all these perceptions of God and all the philosophizing and ideas and stuff we discuss, they're not actually God, are they? It's more lots of people's sort of ideas or expressions or something. And so my point is, or my question is, do you think that God is really just this discovery of or freedom from suffering, and everything else is just an exploration of that?
The common denominator of all yoga, Buddhism, Jain, it's defined as such in the Gita. It's defined as such by the Nyaya Sutras, another sutra. The common denominator, everybody agrees that yoga is that which frees one from suffering. So that's the bottom line. That's putting the bar as low as you possibly can. We wouldn't even be seeking a spiritual path unless we were suffering. If we were really happy, why would we want to change? Why would we be looking for some path? You take a path because you want to go somewhere else. So the starting point of the spiritual journey is suffering. Now, from that point then, and Patanjali says, well, the cause of it is embodiment itself, and he takes it in a particular direction, chapter 2. So he says, what's the cause? What's the hanam hetuhu? It's trasha trishayaho samyoga. They're coming together, the seer and the seen. So that's the first stop. So then we seek a state beyond suffering. So then Patanjali and all these traditions say, well, actually any embodied state is suffering. Why so? Because the body is subject to harm and injury and old age, and it's temporary, and any happiness inducing experience that we think of as happiness is temporary. So even if we say, oh, that was good, it was great, don't tell me that wasn't happiness, that was super, it doesn't last. So then there's the anticlimax, and then we have to seek something else and something else and something else. And then this is Ashanti, Krishna says, Kutaha Sukham, there's no happiness if the mind is always seeking. That's what Rajas is. Desires are raga, and that's Rajas, and Rajas is ever unsatisfied, like a fire, Krishna says. So with all that in place, then if it starts to make sense that, there is this Atman and it isn't the body, then we might seek that. And then if it starts to make sense, well, hang on a minute, but there must be something even beyond that creates the world, and so then we might start to seek God. Now, your comment is, well, is this all words? Is all this theology, is it all words? Well, it depends on your relationship to revelation. If you are open to the fact that, as Patanjali says, Ishvara is guru, so guru reveals stuff. Like right now, we've been sort of studying these books, and the teachings hopefully have revealed a little bit about the information in the books. So that's the role of the teacher. So if we accept revelation, then we're open to the fact that, yes, we're limited by our chittavrittis and our words and our concepts, but God can actually manifest. He can manifest directly, and some entities have visions of God and all of that. And sacred texts are also revelations. So then we absorbed our mind, instead of just speculating like Aristotle did. He didn't accept any revelation. He pushed human intellect as far as it could possibly go. In other words, what can we philosophically and defensively say about a God and the nature of God in a way that cannot be criticized? Because philosophy, that's what you have to do. You come up with theories that cannot be faulted. There's no dosha. So he pushed that as far as he could, and ended up with this sort of indifferent prime mover that has no connection with the world, and blah, 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 blah. So, but if you accept revelation, if you don't, you're on your own. Then you're on your own. And good luck. But you're still trapped by the mind. So how can that which traps you, I suppose, okay, that same thing which traps you with its own resources, how is it going to free you? So therefore, there is this element of humility. There is this element of faith. Let's be clear, it's faith. Faith that God, if it makes sense, you can use Aristotle's logic and such other kinds of logic. There were Indian rationalists who did what Aristotle did and just say, look, they may have been Shaivites and Vaishnavites, but when they were being philosophers, they said, let's bracket all that and just what can human reason, where can it get us? How far can it go without being faulted? And they also, not quite the same grounds as Aristotle, but they came up with a supreme intelligence that can be defended against any attack. Can't prove, but it can defend itself. and they came up with the Isvara, defense of Isvara. So that's all you can do with your own intellect. And meanwhile, life is slipping by, and we're not enlightened. So recognizing the limitations of our abilities, karmically limited, then certainly the mood of the bhakta, but even the Patanjalian yogi has faith in Patanjali. Like if he's Patanjali saying Atta yoga chitta vritti nirodha tada drashtu sarupe vastanam, you believe that or you don't. You're not going to do chitta vritti nirodha unless you believe drashtu sarup, that there is a seer there to be experienced as faith. So I don't think you can be free from faith, by the way, even if you don't pursue the Atman. If you think your Ben and Jerry's ice cream and your cappuccino in the morning, your desires are going to give you happiness, why is that not faith? That's just another kind of samskara in the mind that you surrender to. One, not you, but one surrenders to. So we cannot do without faith. So decide what we want to have faith in. The theist is someone who has deep faith that I'm something other than body mind, has applied reason, has studied the sacred text. I mean, has really, really done everything that the mind and body can do to try to really put that faith on the strongest possible foundation. But at the end of the day, they said, okay, now I accept. What's the path? And you accept the path of yoga, you accept the path of bhakti, you accept the path that's been trodden by generations and generations and generations of beautiful spiritual seekers who hand it down. And they're not trying to rip you off. They're not asking for money. They're not selling it. We sell it on our high street. They don't. You can't take a real spiritual teacher cannot charge a fee. He accepts, you accept the donation, but you can't charge a fee because then it becomes compromised and tainted. So if you have faith that these systems have been handed down for generations by people far more committed than you and I to giving their bodies and their minds, everything as far as it can go into trying to place this faith on a rational basis, and then putting it to practice, and then claiming experience, whether it's a Swarupa Vastanam experience or a vision of God, whatever it might be, recording that, handing it down. That seems to me a pretty good horse to put your money on. If you don't, you're going to put your money on some other horse. If you think, it's all faith, so I'm not going to do anything, then it's not that you're not going to do anything. We're going to sit and watch telly, and our life's going to just fritter away, or we're just going to end up going down to the same old pizzeria, same old, Chinese takeaway, same old. Decide what you want to do with your life. We're free. We are free agents, unlike animals. But yes, a certain amount of it is mental vrittis, but they are klishta. Remember, Patanjali says vrittis are klishta or aklishta. There's aklishta vrittis, concepts, thinking about God, pondering God, doing what Aquinas did, and even and Aristotle in his own way, using the intellect in an aklishta way, trying to understand truth. But the bhakta doesn't reject any of that, engages all of that, but also allows primarily that this is what defines Vedanta in the very opening verses of Vedanta. That which the senses and reason cannot capture can only be known through revelation. That's bhakti. So like for the previous question, you sit there in Chitta Vritti Nirodha, if that's your practice, for as long as it takes. You know damn well that if there is a God, you cannot capture him with your yogic virtuosity or your scriptural study or any of those things. He can only reveal himself or herself if it's Devi. Decide what you want to put your faith in.
Thank you. I love what you said about Descartes and Patanjali in a room arguing. Well, questioning.
You'd have a heart attack, Descartes. You go, hang on, cogito ergo sum, but and then Patanjali would say, well, you have to stop cogitating.
Well, yeah.
Would say, would I stop swimming? Does that mean I cease to be? You see, by philosophy, even the great Greeks and Descartes, brilliant. They didn't get to a place of understanding that the mind is not the Atman. Philosophy can't reveal that. Look how brilliant Plato. The whole of Western philosophy is based on Plato. He never got to that place of. He never got to the deep level dualism of yoga. So philosophy has to be revealed. We follow Patanjali. Patanjali is revelation. That's why we do the Namaha in the beginning of teaching. And if you don't want to accept revelation, you think it's all mental clutter and words, then what are you going to do? It's trapped by your mind. You're still going to trap by your mental words. But then what kind of words are you going to be trapped by then? Telly? Take your pick.
Sorry, can I just say one more thing?
Yeah.
I think that's such a brilliant thing to say, surprisingly, but
yeah,
not surprisingly from you, but so
is that Ruthie?
Yes, sorry, it's Ruthie. Yeah. So that's a really great thought about the philosophy and religion being different. I think sometimes at the end of it there is this much bigger idea than the mind that can't be just sort of intellectualized out, even though I suppose that's what Patanjali is trying to sort of do. But I think it's sort of not quite explained in a lot of yoga, that is what is at the center of it all, that there is this idea of God, and it isn't just philosophizing like Descartes or some mindfulness and stuff like that. It's very different, and I think it gets sort of muddled together quite a lot. So it's really great to hear that sort of clarity. Thank you.
Yeah, we can't capture truth by our minds, but what we can do, we shouldn't throw away our minds. These are instruments that we're given, and they can be used to pursue the truth. Descartes he was trying to understand God. He was using his mind in the best possible way. But he was, karmically limited to his sources, which were biblical sources. Nothing wrong with that. And he would, and he was in the age of, I don't know when he was, but was he pre-enlightenment or post-enlightenment? He was pre-enlightenment, wasn't he? 16th century, 17th century. Anyway, he has his cultural moment. He's engaging with his intellectual world. And but actually some of these philosophers were Christians. They'd probably go to church and do piety in a Sunday, but when they were engaging with philosophers, they do the dharma of the philosopher. So so these are different dharmas, and theology tries to put them together. Theology takes philosophy and applies it to revelation. That's what theologian does. Takes that's what Aquinas did with Greek philosophy. So a theologian is not just someone faith, I'm just faith, Theologian is intensely, and I'm not saying you have to be intellectually inclined. I mean, the gopis, some of the best lovers of God are illiterate. Some of the great bhakti stories of India, they're illiterate people, but they completely surrender. So you don't need to be an intellectual or have deep level scholastic understanding to be a bhakta, or even to be a jnani, or to be, most people doing Patanjali yoga. You've been to India. Those sadhus walking around India in their loincloths and dreadlocks, the real sadhus, they're all illiterate. They can't read. Where are they getting their knowledge? They have a guru. It comes down orally. They have their ways of, same information. So the point is, in bhakti anyway, you surrender everything, surrender your mind, your intelligence, and be open to the possibility that Bhagavan helps with that by providing scriptures like the Bhagavata Purāṇa. This for me is the most, everyone has their own canonical text. Even though I translated this, it's not my canonical text. I did that for the yoga community, and I did that to create this link. This is where for me, that is the deepest, that is the revelation that I and it's very philosophical. So what's philosophy for? It's to satisfy those that have the reason, to satisfy reason. Not, you can't grasp it by reason, but the reason at least has to feel like, okay, this is a rational thing I'm doing. So you push reason as far as it goes. That's what theology is. That's what Svadhyaya is. And then at the end, you take that leap. You decide where you're going to take it. You're going to take it into belief in an Atman, You're going to take it into the belief in Isvara. What kind of Isvara? Then you take your leap of faith. But you put your reason as, you take it as far as it can go. You flog it. It's like you flog it all the way. And remember, if you decide you don't believe in an Atman, you don't believe in God, you're still believing. You're believing that there's only matter. That's a belief. So then you're putting your faith in materialism. So let's be clear about that. So let's use our intellect to decide what is the most reasonable place to place our faith. But if you're going to go with it, but at some point you just go for it. You push it as far as it goes, and then you take that leap. Very well informed leap, and you keep nourishing it with svadhyaya, as Patanjali says that. Especially if you do bhakti. Pranidhana, you surrender. Krishna says at the end of many births, remember that verse, after many births, a wise person, someone who's already wise, already knows about the Atman, many births before surrenders to me, says Krishna. So anyway, yes, it's faith. Decide what you want to put your faith in. That's it, bottom line.
Okay, thank you, Edwin. I'm conscious that some of us are going to get up and practice early in the morning, including me. It's now 10:30. I should be up at 4 or earlier. So I'm going to knock it on the head there. But thanks very much for coming, everyone. And thank you, Edwin. It's been 3 hours. It actually felt like 30 minutes. It was wonderful. Better than TV. Thank you.
All right. Cheers. Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
All right. Okay. Video will be out. So, you can, we'll send the video around to those that didn't come as well. All right. Okay. Thanks for coming,
everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Edwin.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful.
Great.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.